after our lunch break, and we are on item 4, the Wyoming State Museum. So Director Glenn, or Interim Director Glenn, if you would like to talk to us about the State Museum. I see we have a handout. So committee, we have a handout on this, and we'll try to make up a little bit of time if we can.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and we will rock this to get you back up. Before we start, I just wanted to introduce one new employee that kind of stepped in. It's Angelina Stancampiano. She was actually our Employee of the Year last year, and she's our interpreter in this district and does an amazing job for us. So welcome. I'm going to speak for about 30 seconds and pass it off to Sarah. I talked about the importance of this Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund bill and how important it was in the coming session. The next thing up is talking about the museum. We spent a lot of money on this level 1 and level 2 study, and I think the next steps are to figure out what we're going to do with it, and I will pass it off to Sarah.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, this is something we've been working on since December of 22, and I think it's really important. It's really exciting to see what could happen, what our possibilities are. And you're going to get to meet Kevin today. He's the director of the State Museum, and he's doing a fantastic job there. And he has really done the lion's share of the work on working with the consultants on this study. And I know he's put a lot of thought into it, and he's going to walk you through. We just got the results like just 2 weeks ago. We're still a little draft form-ish, but just got the results from the consultants. So this is all kind of hot off the presses, and you guys are going to be the first group that gets to see it. So Kevin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Kevin Ramler, Director of the State Museum. As Sarah said, we're wrapping up this level 1 and level 2 study, working from about a 95% draft information here today. And it's a lot of material, you know, as these things typically are, a couple hundred pages. So I really wanted to offer a high level summary for you all on some of the key findings from this study. We're going to kind of look at the analysis of the current facilities, some of the public survey feedback that we received, benchmarking, and then the conceptual design and site analysis. So the project, we worked with 3 consultants: Tobin Associates, the Cheyenne architecture firm; HGA is an architecture firm with extensive experience in museum projects; and then G&A is an museum operations and experience specialist. So after looking at a couple different sites, the design team decided to narrow in on these 2 different options that you see here today. So you'll see option A presented as Barrett South. That is an expansion of the existing Barrett building onto the south lawn. Then option B, Capitol East. It was important to look in the Capitol complex. And so this is what we often refer to as the St. Mary's lot, directly east of the Capitol, all new construction on that site. So if we decide to move forward with this, the process, we're confident that the Reimagined State Museum will be a point of pride for Wyoming residents, a magnet for tourists, provide an engaging visitor experience, highlighting the natural and human history of Wyoming's 23 counties. And it'll be a trusted and valued resource for the state, and expand our educational impact, increase our statewide outreach, and also improve the collections facilities so that we're able to preserve Wyoming's heritage for future generations. So you can see a little bit of the background there on the State Museum. There's been government sanctioned collecting of historical material since before there was a state of Wyoming. The territorial legislature started that really early on. We moved into our current facilities in the Barrett building in 51. So we're approaching our 75th year in that building. It's more than half of Wyoming's history as a state. The State Museum's been located there. And I think this the statistics you see here is a big part of what's driving this project, is that when we moved into the Barrett building in 51, there were fewer than 55,000 artifacts in the collection. In the ensuing 7 decades, we've grown that collection to over 72,000. So there's a whole bunch of history that the State Museum holds that we just haven't been able to really put out there for people. And the Barrett building was never really intended to house that kind of history. There's really been a need for a purpose-built state museum for a long time. The earliest plans that I'm aware of were actually developed in '64. So this has been a well-established need. So moving on to the evaluation of our current facilities, this report identifies 6 deficiencies that could be addressed by moving forward on this project, as well as 4 opportunities that we might be able to pursue. I'm not going to hit all of these, but really the deficiencies are the Barrett building is primarily an office building. It was designed as an office building. It looks like an office building. It has a lot of the limitations of an office building. And that's just one of the things we've struggled with. And one of those points is that people don't know there's a museum there. And we've talked to Cheyenne residents who live blocks away and lived there for years before they realized that there's a museum in this building. So it doesn't have that visible identity as a cultural site. This next point, number 2, is really, really important. So you see the number of artifacts that we have in the collection. We don't really have the facilities to preserve those artifacts. And so preserving that history for future generations requires these well-controlled environments. And again, because the Barrett's designed as an office building, it was never built with that envelope that's meant to maintain these temperature and humidity levels. And just as an example, looking at last month's climate report, I mean, there's a 48-hour period where it's just a W. And so we're starting at like 50% humidity, dropping down to 35, back up to 45, down to 35, back to 49. That kind of swing in temperature and humidity for any organic material like woods and leathers, taxidermy, as I'm sure you know, it shrinks, it expands, it shrinks and expands. And over many cycles of that, eventually you get cracks, you get real severe damage, which we have seen happen. So we just can't really, we've talked with A&I about this, and they're very helpful and very good at trying to address our concerns. But what they tell us is there's only so much you can do to try to fix this when the building wasn't designed to be able to maintain those standards. And then the gallery spaces are also really limited by that office building format. There's 20 foot, every 20 feet in a grid, there's columns. This is the structure of the building. The ceilings are really low, 9 feet, 10 inches is the average usable height. There are sections that are 7.5 feet high ceiling. So when we came in the public survey, people notice that, that it's small and that it's cramped. And looking at some of these opportunities that we might be able to pursue, I mean, I think the big one from my perspective is to be able to meet the public's expectations for the interpretation and the exhibit of Wyoming's history. So you see there only 1.5% of the collection is on exhibit. That is really a low number, even by museum standards, where sometimes they are, you know, very low. That's really a very low number. So we know the public expects to see more. They tell us that. And that's one of the big pieces of feedback that we got when we did the public survey for this process. Other opportunities are just expanding the impact, both the people that we can reach and also the economic impact of the museum. So the projections from G&A based on their modeling is that this project could double the just through the door attendance for the museum. And in terms of economic impact, we know that museums based on a 2017 study contribute about 200 million annually to Wyoming's GDP, including like 17.5 million in state and local taxes. We know that the people who are traveling to visit museums, the cultural and heritage travelers, spend 60% more than leisure travelers traveling for other reasons. And they're also the biggest part of that market. So 76% of leisure travelers are visiting or engaging with cultural heritage sites or events. So there's a big opportunity to capture this part of the audience. And with our location right in the corner, kind of an entry point to Wyoming, we have an opportunity to prime people if we can get them to stop and build an attraction that's going to get them off the highway and into town. We have the opportunity to prime them and prep them as they travel across the state to help them recognize what the other opportunities are that align with their interests, whether it's military history, whether it's kind of Western history more generally. We can really be that, help them find their way through the state. So moving on to this public input piece, we did run this survey for a couple weeks in March and the beginning of April. We generated 292 responses to the survey, which, as you can see, they were overwhelmingly Wyoming residents who had been to the museum. So they're very familiar with the situation that we have. I think the good news is that when people are asked on this first question you see here, compared to other museums, how would you describe the State Museum? They say it's great, they say it's friendly, they say it's informative. But the flip side is they also say it's cramped, it's small, and it's dated. And in fact, small was the most common keyword that came in response to that question. So people really recognize that it's just a little underwhelming for what you'd expect from a state museum. We only have a little under 13,000 square feet of gallery spaces. So for me, the biggest takeaway from this museum, from this public survey is this second slide. When we asked people what changes we could make to positively impact their experience, what we heard was exhibits, 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 exhibits. So you see that top four. People just want more. They want to see more immersive exhibits, more history, more natural history, just more square footage of exhibits. And then even if you go down a couple beyond that, more art exhibits. So there's this real desire to see more of Wyoming's heritage, more of our history, more of our culture on exhibit. And what we found in some of the comments on open-ended questions is it's not just more square footage, but it's wanting to see a broader array of stories told about the history of Wyoming. And so, we had comments that we need to do a better job telling the suffrage story, that we need to do a better job talking about the oil and gas industry. And that's really not covered very well in the museum right now. And so, if you refer back to the collections numbers, you can see we probably have the collections to tell those stories. We just don't have the space or the resources to really be able to meet the public's expectations around that. Moving on to this benchmarking part, this was led by GNA, and I think this really helped us frame the way we thought about how to move this project forward. So they did a market analysis starting off. They determined, 3.2 million total potential audience. That's a huge number because it includes every person who lives within a 75-mile radius, plus every overnight visitor that Cheyenne sees. Most cultural or really any attraction doesn't capture a huge percentage of that. Right now, we capture about 1.4% of that total potential audience. No institution in Cheyenne captures more than 1.9. But they've kind of determined that lack is more about the scale and the experience than it is necessarily a market cap. There is potential in that market to sustain better visitation. And the way they got to their projections for what we could do is looking at some other national institutions but in similar markets, so Western markets in mid and small size communities, and those on average capture about 2.5%. So I think we can at least get to that. Some of these ones, like I know in New Mexico, can get up to 4 or 5, but in a small market, it's hard to get much more. It's hard to get even to 10% capture on that total potential audience. Another thing we asked the analysts to do is to look at the revenue picture. So the museum has always been free, and historically we've been free. And one of the first things they brought up was the idea of charging admission. And we kind of pushed back on that. We don't think it's right for the state museum to charge admission for Wyoming residents. And so we came back to them and said, we'd like you to model what the revenue picture might look like if we only charged people coming in from out of state. So they did that modeling, and based on that, they think from the revenue side or the admission side, it's the potential for $400,000 annually in revenue on that. They also looked at a couple different revenue streams that you'll see here. Membership. 85% of state museums currently have a membership program. Interestingly, only 58% currently charge admission. So we see membership programs even in museums that aren't currently charging. We don't think that would be a huge market because your core audience for a membership program is going to be your local residents. And if they're already getting in for free, you got to have all these other perks as part of that membership program. But they did project probably $15,000 to $20,000 annually in potential revenue from a membership program. The next piece here is facility rentals. And, this is a big thing in museums. Almost every museum is doing this. It is a huge potential revenue generating thing. And so we looked at some of the other kind of comparable institutions around us. I know talking to the Idaho State Museum when they did a renovation in like 2017, 2018, they built event revenue as the core of their business model for how they were going to run that museum going forward. Montana, who you may be aware is in the midst of a big renovation of their historic facilities. They're building a whole event center into that space because there's such a huge potential for that. And then we actually went down to History Colorado and talked to them about how they manage this. And for them, it's an $800,000 annual revenue generator. It's the biggest contributor for earned revenue from them, bigger than admissions. So it's kind of the way museums are going. When you have these great spaces, people want to use them. And even in our, what I would say, suboptimal space, we have requests for that. We have people who want to come in and use it for meetings, people who want to hold private events there. So based on GA's projections, that's a potential for probably about $100,000 annually through facility rentals and private events. The final revenue stream here is concessions. This is actually the only one that we currently are using. Our museum store, which hopefully some of you have been to, is run by a concessionaire. For us right now, it generates between 15 and 20,000 a year. This study looks at, with increased attendance, a newer facility, there's potential for that to grow. And it also contemplates, especially in option B, on the Capitol East site, the option to add a cafe or coffee shop into that, which would, increase that potential concessions revenue, probably to the order of about 45,000 a year. So, we have the option to activate on none or one or all four of these revenue streams. But if we were to pursue all four of them, it's looking at 500 to 600,000 annually for the museum. One of the reasons we really wanted to look at revenue is as a way to fund statewide programs. So the museum does a lot of stuff to try to get out and impact residents statewide, given our, far from central location in Cheyenne. So we do traveling exhibits that are free for any institution to rent across the state. They're traveling education trunks. So we'll ship a trunk to classrooms where they can pull stuff out and learn about it, and then do a virtual field trip with our educator. We have done technical assistance where we'll send staff out to help other museums develop collections policies, just kind of get a handle on some of the more technical aspects of running a museum. All of those are really successful. Unfortunately, we struggle to maintain or just to keep up with the level of demand for all of that. So one of the big goals of looking at the potential to generate revenue for the museum is to put those resources back into those statewide outreach efforts. And so we think 30 to 40% easily of that revenue will go back into that. And for context, I think our current statewide programs, we're probably spending $3,000 or $4,000 a year. So it's a huge potential investment in the museum community across the state. And that was really important as we move through this process to underscore ways that this could benefit the museum community across the state and not just be something that's located down in Cheyenne. The last piece of the benchmarking here was again looking at some project comps. So all the numbers you'll see throughout are adjusted to Q3 of 2025. That is the projected midpoint of construction where this project to move forward with funding in the next session. So we looked at basically, you'll see 6 things listed here. 5 of them are other state institutions projects dating back to 2010 with North Dakota, all the way to the Montana Heritage Center, which is currently under construction, is slated to open in late 24 or early 25. Sounds like they're a bit ahead of schedule, which has got to be nice. I wanted to talk just briefly about that one because I think it's the most recent. It is probably similar in size and scope to what this project is looking at. So they had been in their current building since 1952. So a year after we moved into ours. Their initial expansion was funded in 2019. They broke ground in 2021. And like I said, slated to wrap up in 24 or 25. The project, it is a expansion and renovation, so it's 133 square feet total in the project. About 66 square feet of that is completely new construction. The rest is renovation. And you can see there, the construction costs is $87.7 million. Escalated, depending on how you want to calculate inflation to that Q3 of 25, that comes out to about 100 or 105 million for the total, not total, but the construction costs on that project, or about 752 per square foot. The majority, or I think the biggest chunk of time on this project was really spent on this next section, the spatial program. We really wanted to make sure that we got the scale of this project right. Again, referring back to that collection number, you could see we have the collection to support a huge gallery space. But it was really important for us that we were able to come up with a program that would meet the public's expectation for expanded displays while minimizing the need for additional staff, because we do know that, you know, expanding the space is going to require more resources in order to keep up with it. So that's how we landed at this this number. You'll see recommended square footage just under 108,000 square feet. And that could be met at either of these two option sites. So that's the good news there. Early on in the process, we looked at the potential to relocate all of our storage onto this one site. So some of you may know, and I believe in October, we'll probably have a chance to tour our offsite facilities. So the bulk of the collection is actually stored offsite. We only have about 6,000 square feet on-site collection storage. And we looked like the optimal thing would, of course, be have everything under one roof. And we asked them to model what it would look like to put all that collections in one site. And it's cost prohibitive. I mean, the numbers that were coming back are, you know, 250 million. And we just didn't think that was feasible. So the good news is if we were to move forward with this as proposed, we do triple the on-site collection storage, and we would be able to use compact storage, which would really significantly increase the amount of the collection that we could store in this new facility. Currently with our on-site storage, the structure in the Barrett building was value engineered out of that expansion project back in the 90s. And so we can't even maximize the storage capacity of the 6,000 square feet that we do have. If you do get an opportunity to tour that space, you'll see there is sections of the floor that have black tile and sections of the floor that have white tile. And we can only store stuff on top of the black tile because the structure in the building can't support compact collection storage. So with this, we would keep, as you see at the bottom, that 40,000 square feet at the Unicover building, but we would be able to relocate a lot more of our sensitive objects into the new higher quality collection storage. So for instance, we have a really significant collection of saddles that's currently stored out at Unicover, and that has really been through some rough times with the temperature and humidity swings out there. All that kind of stuff would be able to move into the new facility. We'd be looking to store basically large artifacts, you know, heavy equipment, vehicles, and big taxidermy would still remain at the Unicover building. But we'd also have the opportunity then to have the capacity there to continue to grow the collection over the next 75 years, you know, so that's a big advantage. And there is a little bit of money potential in this project to take some actions to improve the conditions at that offsite storage facility as well. So moving on then to the conceptual design. So this is where you can kind of see what, you know, where it really gets exciting. And you think about like what this building could potentially look like, how it could really live within the Capitol complex. So that was one of the big things we thought about going into this, is making sure that whatever this building would be, that it would fit and kind of be copacetic with the architecture that currently is in the Capitol complex. If you look at option A, Barrett South, the kind of overarching concern there was to make sure that that expansion would respect the existing architecture of the Barrett building. Of course, you're going to lose the symmetry because you're building a big expansion onto the south end of it. But we wanted to make sure to respect the materials, the kind of lines, the language of the architecture of that building, while also providing a entrance that people would immediately recognize as, hey, this is a museum, this is a cultural site that I'd like to visit. So you can see there's a big central lobby there that connects with the less climate sensitive activities remaining in the Barrett building. So our education programs, all the office space and such. And on the new expansion side of things is where you would have all those exhibit galleries, as well as the new collection storage. And so that allows us to get, you know, that 20-foot high ceilings, which is the standard for museum galleries in that new facility. If you look at option B, the Capitol East, the real overriding imperative here was to say, if we're going to be right across the street from the Capitol, this National Historic Landmark, we need to take advantage of those views and really highlight that building and how important and special it is for the people of Wyoming. So you can see the glazed western front of this building. Really to take and then landings that with stairs that go right along the front of that building to really take advantage of those views to the Capitol. The concept here, which you'll see there, is kind of the front porch. So this fully enclosed area serves as kind of a public meeting space and a space to have educational programs on our really popular family days. One of the things the market research really showed is that there is this will come as no surprise, but there's a huge demand for indoor spaces where you can have fun and do things over the 6 to 8 months of winter that we get. And so this would really help accomplish that by having this really beautiful long lobby in the front that would help bring the outside in, but you'd still be nice and protected from the elements there. So we asked these consultants to basically give us kind of a rubric for how we might compare these two different options, which you'll see on the last page there. And looking at that, you can really tell there's substantial advantages to that option B, to that Capitol East site. That connection to the Capitol is really important. Not just kind of symbolically, but we share a huge audience with the Capitol. So the school groups that are coming during session and during our busy field trip season, which is just wrapped up, they're often visiting both sites. And so being right there connected will help. We also, the tourists who are now the ones showing up to replace all the school kids are also typically visiting both those sites. So that's a big advantage to that location. Another thing that we heard in the public feedback is please don't build on the south side of the Barrett because that's a beautiful green space and there's not a lot of that down in the Capitol complex. So option B actually gains green space for the Capitol complex because you got a building and the surrounding landscaping that would replace the parking lot currently there. And then I think the other big advantage that you'll see coming up in a lot of these in this chart is the opportunity to design an experience from the ground up versus trying to conform it to the existing building. So there are definitely compromises in option A that we have to make to maintain the connection between the floors. Barrett has 12-foot floor to floor height. So option B just kind of frees you up to design the optimal building for a museum. So I put the project vision here at the end, which may seem kind of funny, but I think we recognize that we're really at mile marker 1 of a marathon or maybe an ultra marathon. And so this is the vision that we hope can carry us through this project because it is a really big investment. It is a really big opportunity for the state to celebrate its heritage. And we think that this vision really can carry us through that. And then the very last thing there was, again, from the public feedback we received, what the public would like us to think about as we make future plans for the museum. So just some more feedback that tells us, hey, we're doing some great things, but also, hey, here are the things that are not meeting our expectations, and we can build that into the project. So that was a lot, I think, really quickly, hopefully. But I'm happy to answer any questions you all would have. And thank you for your time.
Questions, committee? I have a few, if you
Okay.
don't mind. What would happen to the Barrett building should the new building be built? Would that be demolished and replace parking, or would it go to office space?
Madam Chair, there's nothing says for sure, but my guess is that if there was a new building, the Barrett building would be remodeled in such a way that it could be used for office space that the state is trying to get out of rental space. That would open it up for use for office space.
Thank you. Then would parking space be replaced somewhere?
And that is something, we
Ms. Needles?
discussed this with the consultants quite a bit, and they kind of advised us to not really think about the parking in detail quite yet. That they know that it would be part of what would have to happen to the project moving forward. And they did design some parking behind the museum building because we would need a loading dock and things like that. But I think that would all be, this is so early on, that I think all of those considerations would have to come down the road, but they're definitely in the back of our minds.
Also, do you have a comparison of visitors that go to the Capitol and visitors that come to the State Museum?
Madam Chairman, I don't think we have that, but we could probably find that out.
I believe that the Capitol is the largest attraction other than like Frontier Days or something like
Yeah,
that.
I could certainly get back to you with
Okay,
that.
that'd be great. And then, I guess, does this take into account your proposed growth in the size of the collection over the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah, Madam Chair, what this would allow with retaining the Unicover building and taking some action to improve the facilities there is absolutely give us that storage capacity for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Of course, down the line, there's the potential that we'd have to act on increased collection storage. But because we would be adding that compact collection storage in the new facility, we would gain really a lot of space back at the Unicover building. Another thing this does is relocate our shop into the new facility where it actually needs to be, because that's where we're building all the exhibits anyways, which frees up about 5,000 square feet in the Unicover building for collection storage. So I do think it does cover us for the next several decades at least.
Co-Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just a couple questions. Well, first of all, the one survey that said more immersive exhibits, I can't believe I can read that with my good eyes still. Are we talking more hands-on? Is that what they're saying there?
Madam Chair, Co-Chair, yes, I think that's it. People, especially the museum going public, has gotten used to some more hands-on, but also just more environments, exhibits that are less objects and boxes and make you feel more like you are a part of the experience. So that's what was described there.
Can I have a follow-up?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the reason I say that is you listed the Utah Natural History Museum. I've taken my grandkids there. They've been there at least twice. They want to go again this summer. They're just 8 and 10. And I think because it was so interactive and there was so much to do, as well as really cool things for us adults. And they said, Grandma, our mom said that you used to take them, drag them around to museums and Capitol buildings. And I said, yeah, I did. The thing I think is kind of cool about what you're the offerings here is if we could keep the museum close, even closer yet to the Capitol, because I would, if we had to go to a Capitol, I mean, I used to drag the kids to a Capitol. We went to a new state. We're going to the Capitol. But if we had to go 3 miles to find the museum, it may not make the list. I like, museums almost as much as a Capitol, but I really think this, the options that you've mentioned here with a new one, with the Barrett building, I think that's really, I guess there's not a question here, but I think you guys are headed in the right direction.
Wouldn't you agree?
Wouldn't you agree?
Madam Chair, Co-Chair, I would agree.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thinking about just these projects on the list here, I'm curious if there was a private philanthropy piece of the building cost, and the numbers here are just construction only, not other things we would need.
Machine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We'll take that in 2 parts. So I'll answer the part about, what was the first question? So what I was going to say was the membership piece that we mentioned is maybe step 1 in kind of forming a foundation for the museum where there's private fund arm. I have been trying for 15 years to form a foundation for the Wyoming State Museum. And what I've learned from people that have experience doing this is that you don't want it to live within the state government, right? It needs to be a separate entity. And finding the right champions and people that want to take that on and do it and start that is not an easy task, is what I've learned. But I do think that I think with a new building, the concept of a new building, I think we have a lot of opportunity to build that, to get people excited about something new and get behind it and start a foundation and really start raising public or private funds to match the public funds in this project.
Thank you. Is there a good model for like a Friends of the X Museum or Heritage Center that we could look at in other states as well?
Absolutely. Yes, there's lots of models in other states and most state museums have these. And in fact, we have a Friends of the Museum right now, but it's really just our volunteer group and they don't raise a lot of money. You know, they're the folks that if you walk in our building, they're sitting at the front desk, but they're really to help with the museum, not necessarily as fundraisers. And so we really do need a foundation that is just specifically for fundraising for the state museum. So yes, it's a very common model and I think we need to go there.
Representative, any more?
Matt, one other follow-up.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Representative.
Do we have any kind of just estimate on the cost differential between the two options?
Sarah,
Madam Chair, Representative Storer, yeah, so they have provided kind of their initial opinion of probable costs between those two. It is about a $10 million difference with the new construction being the more expensive option, of course, but I think we were pretty pleased to see them being as close as they were.
any other questions? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is how, for option B, how would this affect the construction process, affect the surrounding neighborhoods? And would it even extend into the surrounding properties? Thank you.
Director.
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't know that they've really fully examined what that would be. I do know that there was a lot of thought in that conceptual design about how it would affect, because that block north, as you know, is a residential. And so we're happy to share, of course, the full report once that draft or the completed draft is to us. But what you'll see is they intentionally offset the building to the southern side of that block. And also, as you may know, there's a slope so that you don't have what feels like a hulking building right in these people's front lawns. And there's also a lot of plan for landscaping on that. In terms of the actual construction, I don't know that we have a real solid answer for that at this point.
Anything else? Anybody else? Questions? Oh, Senator Guru.
Thank you. And you may have answered this. I just didn't catch it. Have you talked with the Capitol Square Committee, with the folks that are doing that? What's their take on this?
Yeah.
Ms. Skeen.
Madam Chair and Senator, yes, both Kevin and I have participated in almost every one of those meetings with that committee, and we haven't specifically held a meeting to discuss this, but we have been discussing this project with all of those members since we started it.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Interim Director Glenn?
Madam Chairman, they mentioned talking about giving you a tour at the Unicover building in October. If you haven't been out there, it is amazing to go out and see those things. Kevin and Sarah took me out there, being a Western Horseman and seeing that saddle collection, the branding iron collection. I saw a Native American travois from the 1800s. And I was just aghast that these things still existed. So encourage you all to get out there. We'd be happy to give you a tour anytime. And also the one last thing I would say, the concession piece, I love, because during lunch, when you all are going down to lunch, I get really tired of eating at Taco John's. So having another opportunity would be really beneficial for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Glenn. Ellis, so if we could put that on possibly our October agenda to tour the State Museum and the Unicover building, that would be great. So another field trip. Yay, we love field trips. I would encourage you to really take seriously the parking. As I'm there, that parking lot is rarely empty. And so as you look at how this is going to look, I think the parking issue is huge. And that may include creating a multi-story parking garage so that we have places to park and have less impact on the neighborhood, as Representative Singh mentioned. Anything else? Are we good? Okay, I think we will then move on to our afternoon agenda. Oh, public comment, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment? Do we have anybody online? No, okay. Apparently not. All right, so we will move on to the general agency update.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes.
so I just wanted to know what our plan is then for continuing conversation about the State Museum.
I think that we will in our October meeting, revisit this.
Madam Chair, I didn't know, and for those members who have maybe served on appropriations, Senator Guru, what would make sense if we decide just as far as timing, if we wanted to write a letter to our appropriators expressing support? Does that need to happen sooner rather than later, or how does that, what's your experience when committees send their letters of support for projects?
Senator Guru.
Thank you. I think, Madam Chairman.
Yes, Senator.
Usually, the sooner the better. I think that I can only speak for myself and just say that, it's one of those things that's gonna take a lot of lead time and, and give you recent examples. I mean, we just now, got the backing and got the backing from the body to, work on the funding for university projects that have been in the hopper for 5, 6, 7 years plus. Whether the West Stands, Corbett Pool, all that, it's taken that long to get enough steam to get those through. And those had a large component of philanthropy through the UW Foundation Board and Cowboy Joe and all that. So, they came with money, they came with a plan. And then as we watched the dollars escalate over the years, we finally got it done. But it's a long haul. So, I would encourage, I think you're gonna have, this is gonna be one of those ones, you're gonna have to come with money and it's a great project and beautiful, but I would say it's gonna take that kind of commitment. But I think we're from corporate sponsors and things like that moving forward. I mean, well, at UW, I know so far they raised as of last month, $19 million of what they're like $30 million that they're looking to raise out of $70 million worth of projects. That just gives you an idea. So it's that kind of thing I know that the Appropriations Committee is looking for.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you. Just to follow up, that's a hard comparison because universities are just set up different than state government. I mean, if we had waited for a nonprofit that supported the Capitol renovation, that project never would have happened because these are just different animals than universities. And then to your point, how many billions have been invested on UW's campus in the last couple of decades compared to our state museum, which we've just heard the history. We haven't invested in it in a long, long, long time. So I'm wondering, Madam Chair, just the best way to keep this fresh and maybe move it along is maybe we write a letter to the State Building Commission and a letter to the joint appropriator saying that at our October meeting, we're planning on touring this. This has been a project we've been talking now for a few years, and we're trying to figure out a path forward to finding funding for it. So maybe inviting them to our October meeting. And maybe that's a management council request, just thinking it through out loud. So that if appropriators want to travel to Cheyenne to be there and tour take the tour with us, that their per diem would be covered. I don't know, something along those lines, but Madam Chair, I'd make that motion then to write a letter inviting appropriators and State Building Commission to be part of our tour in October.
Okay. Is there a second? Representative Larson, second that motion. Any discussion on the motion to invite Appropriations and Management Council to join us on a tour of the museum and a tour of the Unicover building?
Madam Chair, maybe a clarifying is invite appropriations, but ask Management Council to approve their per diem
Okay.
cost.
All right.
So two separate.
So is that clear to our LSO staff? Any comments about that?
Madam Co-Chair.
Oh, Madam Co-Chair.
Yeah, I would just, Madam Co-Chair, I would just echo that because I know we did a tour. Those of us that were on the TRW, which was only maybe 3 of us, 4 of us. And so there's a whole lot of folks up here that have not been to it. And honestly, it was a great tour, and it really, particularly the number of artifacts that were being stored and not out because there was no lack of space. That made an impact on me. So I do think that it's time to get off our soapbox and start getting serious about a plan for this museum.
And Madam Chair.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you. Just to follow up to my motion, maybe some flexibility. Senator Grube mentioned the appropriators might be meeting at the end of September. So I would leave it up to our chairs to decide, if they want to join us in October, great. If not, maybe they could build it into their agenda at the end of September. But I would leave it to you to sort out those details with LSO, but just indicating we want them to go understand and visit the site and understand the project, a letter along those lines.
All right, so we will get with appropriations. We'll draft a letter to it, inviting them to our October meeting, but then paving the way if they do not want to participate there, that State Parks will get with appropriations and do a tour. Is that acceptable? Okay, good. So, anything else from the committee about that? Oh, we didn't vote on our motion. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, so we'll go ahead with that outreach to appropriations to have them tour the building. A question that I have is, when will you have cost estimates, or will you have them in October? Or are you still in a really early phase?
No, Madam Chair, the opinion or what are the estimate of reasonable costs will be part of that report that is delivered presumably shortly after this, later this month, for SBC in July.
If you could forward that to our committee, that would be very helpful
Yes, of course.
as we go forward with this. Thank you so much. Okay, I guess we'll move on to general agency update from State Parks. Interim Director Glenn. We'll invite Mr. Nayland up as well.
Madam Chairman, thank you. If it's all right with you, I would love to just give about 2 minutes of background on myself, because I think there's a few on the committee that are probably going, who the heck is this Dave Glenn guy as interim directors?
That's my thought. Like, who the heck is this Dave Glenn guy? I would appreciate that.
Great, thank you, ma'am. My brother and sister were born in Wyoming. Believe me, I'm not starting out with birth and going my whole life story, so hang in there with me. My brother and sister were born in Wyoming. I grew up about 60 miles south of Senator Jones and Representative Larson in a little town called Dutch John, Utah, at Flaming Gorge country. For a kid growing up that loved the outdoors, it was the ultimate. I graduated with a degree in commercial recreation from the University of Utah. While I was going to school, I was a fishing guide. I had a captain's license, and I would go up to Alaska in the summers at a remote fly-in destination lodge and guide fishing. And I ended up managing that resort for a couple of years as well in college. As soon as I graduated college, I knew where I was heading. I was coming back to Wyoming. So I came back to Wyoming, moved to Lander, and started working for the National Outdoor Leadership School. And I was on the Alaska-Mexico circuit for a lot of years, running 30 to 90-day wilderness expeditions, teaching technical skills and leadership. That's a young man's sport, young woman's sport. And I remember waking up when I was about 31, going, my back hurts, my knees hurt. My net worth is a 1980 Ford half-ton. I don't have a phone number, and all I have is a PO box. I need to change my life. So I started working in town with them and working in administration, and ended up heading up their Knowles Rocky Mountain division. Counts for about 35,000 student days in Wyoming and some of the surrounding states. Then I had an opportunity to work with Trout Unlimited. They were starting a brand new project called the Sportsman's Conservation Project, getting sportsmen more involved in public policy issues that affect hunting and angling. And I loved that job. It was wonderful. And worked with them for about 8 years. Fell in love, got married, and I may be the only human in the world that met their future wife in Jeffrey City, by the way. So my wife's a veterinarian, and I moved to Casper and started working for State Parks. And Nick and I started together as regional directors and kind of focused on, Nick would manage half the state parks and historic sites, and I managed the other half. And throughout the process, when Director Westby came on as the director of state parks, we spent a lot of time looking at restructuring and what's the most efficient way to do things. And during that time, we kind of realized there's 3 positions that we could move into 2. And that's what we did. When Dominic Bravo moved on, we did not fill that administrator position. We didn't fill the field services chief position. We didn't fill the support services position. Nick and I moved to deputy directors, and we took on all those other responsibilities as well. Concessions and revenue, construction and engineering, planning, outdoor recreation office, motorized trails, those types of things. So that's me in a nutshell, but I have to say this because these 2 are absolute superstars. And Nick running with parks, Sarah running with cultural resources. As interim director, it is so, I shouldn't say this, but it's so easy to do my job with these 2 folks and every other individual that works within our system. So with that, I'll actually give a quick update, and then I'm going to punt it to these folks because they have the coolest and funnest stuff to talk about. A couple thoughts and observations just working as interim. First off, I think is what an amazing and diverse agency. We have state parks, we have historic sites, we have all these other things, motorized trails program, but then you throw in Sarah's side of the world with archives and archaeology and the cultural trust and the state museum. What a diverse agency, but it really fits in well together because the mission is improve communities and enrich lives, and that's what we do. The second thing, and I mentioned it just a second ago, is that leadership matters. The agency is in great shape right now. Nick and Sarah and every one of our staff are really committed. They're passionate. My job really is to clear the runway so they can do their jobs because they're that good. I want to talk a little bit about visitation at state parks because Diane mentioned it, Director Schober mentioned it a little bit, and it's just been crazy over the last 5 or 6 years. And I want to give some examples. 2017, we had 4.1 million visitors. We were growing about 4% a year, up to 4.3. We grew 2% to 4.4. 2020, when tourism tanked, we actually went up to 5.8 million, from 4.4 to 5.8, 33% growth during that time. 21 dropped a little bit to dropped to 1.5% at 5.7. Last year dropped about 9% to 5.2. So as you know, we get to eat what we kill. So we keep a close eye on these numbers, and we make sure, because it's our budget. This is how we get our jobs done. It's too early to track visitation right now for this year, but we do have some information, and we kind of track the number of reservations. A month ago, we ran this same formula. We were tracking about 7% below last year with reservations. We ran it on June 8th, and we're actually tracking 14% up on those. And Stephanie just sent me some new information that Kirk Gowdy, Guernsey, and Glendo right now have no reservable spots available over the next 3 weekends. So that's a good sign for us. The people are coming. We also have some anecdotal information from the Glenda Marina owners. Our staff had a meeting with them. They said it's the busiest spring they have ever had. They cannot keep things on the shelf. They've been as busy as they've ever been. And you would appreciate this. They said they keep hearing from customers that everyone is ready to get out and recreate after such a brutal winter. So I think we all can relate to that. I wish Diana was here because I would like to give her some kudos as well, because we've gotten some really good media hits lately. One was Adventure on the Rocks magazine. That is a magazine for those van life camper folks. Wyoming is the best state to camp in and to travel in. And a lot of that was availability, price, things to do, all those things. I know Diane and her shop are behind the scenes helping to make these things happen. USA Today also listed Kirk Gowdy State Park as the 8th best park in the country to RV camp in. That was actually voted on by people. So there's that many people that are saying Kirk Gowdy is one of the best, little old Wyoming. But we're also kind of looking to the future as well. I think we can all agree that camping 20 years ago is not like camping is now. And I think 20 years in the future, camping is going to be a lot different. One example that I have is I was at an RV Industry Association show where manufacturers are selling to dealers, invite only show. A person with a gentleman that ran an RV club in Texas, they had 18,000 members. He said 18% of his members work from their motorhome. They travel the world, they travel the country, they pull into a campsite, they spend 2 weeks. They do this during the day, and then they recreate in the afternoons and evenings. We also look at other things, like one of the most requested things we get is campgrounds with full hookups. We have 5, 6, 7% of our campgrounds with full hookups. Those are the things that we're looking at as we're looking towards the future as well. Collins Building, there was a note in your packet, but I just want to say thanks to all of you. We actually closed on that building April 19th. Yes, ma'am.
So we have so many new members. Can you describe where that building is? I know we toured it with our previous committee, but if you could describe where that building is and what happens there.
Thank you. I'm trying to be too fast, so I apologize. We have been renting a trails building in Lander for many years. Our rent has been about $170,000 a year for this facility. The owner has been very gracious and actually helped construct things to help us there, such as very tall pole barns to park our snowcats under and other things. So it's been designed for us. In addition to that, inside that building, YDOT has their motor vehicle services, their driver's license registration, as well as the federal courts are in there as well with GSA. So we approached the owner a few years back and said, hey, would you be interested in selling this? And she said, I would only sell it to you. I'll give you some time. And if you don't buy it by a certain amount of time, I'll put it up on the market, but I'll negotiate a price and we'll make it fair, because we've kind of helped design this. We built a great relationship with her. Her name was Kitty Collins. Throughout that process, she ended up passing away about a year ago. But she actually put it in her trust that State Parks got first shot at this building at this price. So we've been working with the legislature for 2 or 3 years now with this committee to try and get this building purchased. And that was passed actually this year, and we closed on April 19th, and it's in Lander, Wyoming. So.
Senator Grew.
And what was the final cost?
2.7-ish million dollars, between 2.7 and 2.8.
And follow, it took
Senator.
3 runs at the appropriations committee to get it, right? Is that about it, right?
Madam Chairman and Senator Greer, if
4.
I'm not mistaken, yes.
Thank you.
Continue.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll also just mention and also we've kind of looked and done the math on this. We think it'll pay for itself in about 15 years' time. And how this works is, it is a state building. It's not State Parks. A&I owns the building. They'll collect the rent. They'll pay all the bills. Any of that extra revenue comes back to the Trails program, since they were the ones that used other funds to purchase the building.
Just one more comment. If any of you are going through Lander, I would suggest that you stop at this building. It is remarkable, and the equipment is remarkable, and it is just a wonderful place to work, as I visited with the employees there, especially Forrest, and gosh, just a terrific place. So if you are in Lander for another meeting or for vacation, just stop and get the mini tour.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And we'll even get you out driving a snowcat. So please come visit. We've also done a little reorganization within our motorized trails program, a little restructuring. This program has been the same essentially for many years, 10 to 15 years. And what we've realized is that we actually are starting to use a lot more contractors than what we have in the past, mainly for efficiencies and to get things done. And as the program grows, we're not growing staff. We're actually trying to help support private business and industry as well. So we restructured that a little bit. We have 6 full-time staff and about 16 seasonals. That's all they do, is go out and groom snowmobile trails and work on OHV trails. And as a reminder, that is paid for with the OHV registration sticker and a percentage of the gas tax that comes back to us for the gas tax that's been used on the snowmobiles and OHVs. Lastly, I'm going to give a quick ARPA update, and then we'll move on to the fun stuff. So as you know, we were awarded about $12 million in ARPA funds this year and an additional $12 million next year. we've been going through the process. We were the first in line with the budget office going, we want in, we want to get rocking and rolling on this. How do we do this? And the AG's office. And the budget office has been very supportive and very helpful with us on this. What we found is it's almost like an upside down pyramid, a funnel is we asked them kind of for some basic criteria and we put some basic criteria together. And then we went out and put together a really robust granting program, application process. We narrowed that down and started working through that process. And as it got narrower and narrower and narrower, we realized that there were a lot more federal regulations than expected on this. And so what we're doing is we're looking at all these grant applications, the $71 million in grant applications, and we're not going to be able to fund a lot of these. So what we're going to do is we're going to fund what we can, and then we're going to go back to the drawing board and restructure that granting program for the leftover of the first 12 million and the additional 12 million as well. So more to come on that. It's also, I think, it shows the importance of creating that outdoor recreation trust fund, because the strings that are attached with these federal dollars are crazy. And so for us to have a program that we can get money on the ground fast and be able to educate, disperse, and concentrate these visitors as they're coming will be very important for us. So if it's all right with you, I will pass off to these folks unless there's any questions.
Questions, committee? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment. I went to the Kurt Gowdy opened a little house on the park. We all toured that when we visited Kurt Gowdy, and it was a 10 out of 10 event. Beautiful. They had little kids singing there, and it was just wonderful. And the Gowdy family was just so gracious, and it was lovely. I'll find some articles and share them with the group, but you guys nailed it. That was a really nice event.
Madam Chairman, Senator Ellis, Nick was actually going to thank you for coming to that event. It was great to see you there. And yes, it was a home run. The former director, Millward Simpson, was there, and he said, you'll attend a lot of events like this, but you'll never, ever attend another event like this. So very appropriate.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Dave. So moving on, I guess, Sarah, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to give, I know we're running kind of short on time. I'm going to give a very quick update, just hit some really high highlights of what's happening with my division this summer. And I just want to put out there too, that there are a lot of you that I'm kind of just meeting and getting to know, and looking forward to getting to know all of you better. So if you're in Cheyenne, give me a call and let me know you're coming through Cheyenne, and I'll make time to sit down and have coffee with you or give you a tour of anything you want that's in Cheyenne, and vice versa. If I'm coming to your community, you may receive an email from me saying, hey, I'm coming for these days. Do you have, half an hour to have coffee with me? Because I'd love for you to learn more about all of the programs. I have 5 different programs within just my division, and they're very diverse. And so I think it's definitely worth spending the time. So just putting that out there. And then I just want to hit on one other thing too. You're going to hear a lot about, I have heard, and will continue to hear a lot about grant programs, especially on my side of the house. The Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund is obviously a grant program. There's the Wyoming Arts Council, who has a lot of grant programs. You're going to learn all about them here next on the agenda. And then, Sean Reese is here with the Wyoming Humanities Council. And I just want to point out that those 3 entities often get confused or overlap. It feels like they overlap a lot. And I actually am going to steal something what Bob Budd said this morning. I consider them, and he said this right, complementary grant programs. We rarely ever, if ever, fund exactly the same thing. We may fund some of the same organizations, but it's typically for different things. Like the Arts Council may, for example, have some funding for an artist that's going to participate in a program, a community program. The trust fund is one of the only places you can get like operating support. So they might fund the lighting or the sound system for that event. And then the Humanities Council might fund something like a talk afterwards. So, they're not the same. They don't do the same thing. They're complementary. I thought that was a really good way to say it. And I'm stealing that from Bob forever now. And then, so just wanted to kind of lay that as groundwork for you as you hear about all these grant programs. I know it can get very confusing. So I want to just cover really quickly the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund. We gave out some grants here recently last month, And we haven't yet, and I want to thank everybody for the increase to our corpus. We're getting real close to 30 million now, and it's going to be fantastic. We haven't seen that money in interest earnings yet, so we didn't have that available for this round. So what we gave out this round, just to give you an idea, we gave out 262,370. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. $262,370 in 24 grant projects all over the state. And so those are projects that are everything from, small educational things, little necessary, like we've done roofing on museum buildings, to being a small part of maybe a big endowment fund for a capital campaign that's happening for a cultural resource in a community. So just wanted to throw that out to you, and we try to send information out to all of you. But if you ever have a specific question about what kinds of things that we've funded in your community, we do keep, I can separate those out and send you a quick email with all that information. Please just to shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'll send it out to you. And then I want to spend a moment just inviting you to participate in some things. One of the funnest parts of this agency in general, and as Dave Glenn just mentioned, and in my division, it's no different. We do lots of fun things. And I think probably the funnest event we do every year, maybe it's the most heartwarming, is the Farm and Ranch event. We do Centennial Farm and Ranch program. And we are doing that again this year, August 19th at State Fair. And every year we get, I think there's only been one year when we haven't had all of the congressionals and the governor there. That's like the only time we see all of them in one place at one time, sort of, which is fun. But the coolest part about it is we get sometimes, 6 generations of ranch and farm families that show up, from grandma in the wheelchair to the newborn babe in arms. And it's really, really fun to see them celebrate their families and their heritage. So if you have an opportunity, we'll do press releases on that. But if you have an opportunity to come, you're going to be at State Fair, please do stop in. There's a free barbecue afterward that's sponsored, and it's a really, really fun event. And then I also want to invite you to, there's some opportunities to participate in archaeology this summer too. So the State Archaeologist's Office, we are almost done. We've just gotten done. In fact, I think we finish up on the 28th, working on recovery of a mammoth. So we haven't found any human implements with it yet. So it's probably, just a mammoth, but when you're an archaeologist and you get the chance to dig up a mammoth, you do it. But it's on the Warren Ranch, which is, many of you people know the folks that own the Warren Ranch that's north of Cheyenne. And so if you want to do that, if you want to just go take a peek one day, let me know. And I will get with the state archaeologist and we'll try and get you out there. There's also, let me pull these up, opportunities to volunteer or just visit the Hell Gap site, which is by Guernsey. This is a National Historic Landmark, multi-layer site from early Paleo-Indian to historic time periods. And they have had visitors there for many, many years. George Frizen, if any of you know who he is, worked on that site, opened it up, and they're opening up a new section this year. So it'll be kind of cool to go see what it looks like when they open up a new section and what they're finding. And then they're going to be looking at the Bighorn Mountains. There's an ice cave, which that sounds really great too. So if you want to do any of these things, just again, send me an email. We'll get you in touch with the right people and get you out there. We'd love to see you guys out there. I think it's, you don't get that many opportunities to do, go out and look at archaeological sites or participate in doing those digs. So we're happy to have you out there as volunteers. That'd be great. And that's all I have, really. Go ahead, David.
Director Glenn.
Madam Chairman, I had to requote that from Sarah. I think it's best saying of the day. It's just a mammoth. So great opportunity especially for those of you that live in Cheyenne that would love to get out and participate in that dig.
I had that same thought.
I was being a little bit sarcastic, but thank you. But I'm happy to take any questions right now, and then I'm going to pass this on to Nick Nalen.
questions from the committee? No. Go ahead, Mr. Nalen.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. Nick Nealon, Deputy Director, State Parks and Historic Sites. Got a few things to update you on, things that we've talked about in the past, and then some new projects that we're working on. First thing is something that you've been heavily involved with, which is the Buffalo Bill master planning effort. As always, we invite all of the local legislators to participate, and you've been very active, and we appreciate that. And thank you very much for your participation up there. We are in what's currently called the pre-scoping phase of the project, which means that we are preparing for the NEPA process with the Bureau of Reclamation. This is a Bureau site, so this is actually a resource management plan. That's a step up from our normal master plan, so a little bit more in depth and requires some more hoops for us to jump through. So we're very early in the process. If everything goes perfectly, it'll be another 18 months, maybe as long as 2 years. And that's typical for a plan of that size. We've been heavily engaged with the community. Just last week, we had 3 events up in Cody, one in the library, one in a brewery, and one at a coffee shop, in our efforts to try to engage with just different types of people in different locations. Not necessarily heavily attended, but we did get some great feedback from those who participated. The feedback that we're getting early on shows pretty much what you said earlier, which is that people are interested in some new trails. They're maybe interested in a little expansion of camping, but they're also interested in us improving facilities that already exist. And I think that's important information for us to hold on to and take forward. We're also working very closely with all the adjacent landowners. We've had conversations with every one of them. And, making sure that they're on board with what we're doing every step of the way is critical to the success of any plan that we have. And I wanted to ask you if you had any feedback through your role in the process.
So I think it's a great idea to go to where the people are. So the brewery and the coffee shop were a little more successful than the library. In the future, I think we'll look at some other venues where people are already gathered that would be interested in commenting, but they are not going to go to a meeting. I think that was kind of the key to that process. The graphics that we had and the thoughtfulness of how those were laid out, very well done. And the consultants were very well versed on what the challenges are, as well as the opportunities. And I was most impressed with the way that they conducted those meetings.
The folks that we're working with, Madam Chairman, on this plan are Ayers and Associates, and they're the folks who did the award-winning master plan for Sinks Canyon as well a couple of years ago. So they're well versed in what they need to do and have done a tremendous job for us.
Madam Chair.
Representative Larson.
Yeah, I just had a comment generally overall on your community engagement through your department. I think it's fantastic. I worked with Angelina last year for a succulent event that she did in Rock Springs, and just a great department to work with, and I appreciate you guys engaging with the community.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, thank you. That's great to hear. We do go out of our way to try to engage, and it's a critical part of our success. So thank you for recognizing that. If there are any other questions about the master plan, I'll move on.
Co-chair Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I just question popped up, and if I don't ask it now, I'll forget to mention it. But yesterday when we were out at the fort with the deputy director and director, the conversation came up with Representative Winter and myself about an update of Hot Springs Park. And could you just do that for the benefit of the committee? Give this an update on it.
Mr. Nalen.
Madam Chairwoman and Co-Chair Schuler, that is actually next on my list. So.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
So hearing no other questions about the master plan, Hot Springs State Park, we've had some significant movement at that location recently. The TP pool is finally in the process of being sold. It should close within the next 30 days. We have a new owner coming in from Alaska, someone who is heavily involved in running hot springs related facilities around the country, really an expert in the field. And so we're very excited with the potential partnership that we have there. Once that sale closes, or at probably around the same time the sale closes and not related to the sale closing, we've also been working on developing an RFP to create a new facility at the park, a hotel, potentially water park type facility, something much more modern. There was a study some years ago that said Hot Springs could take, I think, another 80 or 90 hotel rooms, and potentially this facility could fulfill that need. So we're ready to go with that RFP almost, and it should coincide roughly around the same time. In the next 30 to 60 days, probably we'll get that RFP out there.
Any questions about Hot Springs State Park? Representative Winter, that's your area. Any comments? No. All right.
Last update I have, Madam Chairwoman, is for the Sutton Archaeological Site. Those of you who are, I'm sure, all familiar with that because we dealt with it last year during the session. The boundary survey for the site will begin this month. It took us a little while to get the contract ready to get permission from the landowner, the adjacent landowner, to get on the site. So the boundary survey will take place this month. The cultural survey will follow immediately upon completion of the boundary survey. We have the contract ready to go, and it'll be signed and executed as soon as we have the boundary survey completed. We've been working very closely again with John Voigt, who is the owner of the mine right there. I went out there with some of the team and took a tour of the entire site, his operation, as well as up to the Sutton parcel. It's quite an impressive place. We got to see the whole operation, really spent the whole day out there. And they're having an event the last Saturday in June at that site. I think there's a little charge to the public to go out there, but they'll take you around and show you everything that they're doing. So if you happen to be in the Sunrise area, I'm going to try to get up there myself, and I recommend it to anybody else. But so we're working with him to secure permanent access to the site. We're developing an MOU. We've gone back and forth with him and with the Attorney General's office, and we hope to have that in place sometime soon as well. So we're making good progress.
Any questions about Sutton Archaeological Site? Nick, can you describe a little more in detail where that is and what it is for our newer members?
Madam Chairwoman, be happy to. So the Sutton site is a 46-acre parcel outside of Sunrise, up in the Guernsey State Park area. We will run it as a satellite of Guernsey State Park. In fact, the site is it's an important archaeological site. It features many stone rings of a size and nature that are not typically seen. They're incredibly large. We have some great aerial photographs, which I think we shared with the committee in the past, just to show you the scope of it. And when you're out there on the site, it's even more overwhelming to see just how big these things are. It's right next to the Red Ochre mine that Senator Ellis would bring the dirt for every time we had a meeting. It's right next to that. It's close to the Powers 2 site and not far from El Gap, I think, as well. So it's the folks there contend that they're all connected one way or another. And, you know, that may well be the case. I don't know enough about it.
Any questions from the committee? Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to publicly thank the State Parks Organization for all they've been doing for the Hot Springs State Park. It's going to be a destination point, I really believe, and we owe a lot of it to these folks right here. So thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Winter, thank you very much. As you're aware, we have a new superintendent out there who's one of our superstar superintendents, real go-getter. And I think he's going to make a huge difference in that area as well. So we're very excited for the future. Thank you.
All right. Is that it?
Madam Chairwoman, I can continue.
You can.
Thank you. So the On to some new things. The National Recreation and Park Association, along with the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration, recognize the best park systems in the country every year. And they do it in different classes of parks based on the size of the park. Every other year, they recognize the best state park system. This year, the 4 finalists include 3 of the largest premier park systems in the country: Texas, Ohio, and Missouri state parks, and also Wyoming state parks. So we're a finalist for the award this year. Very excited about that. We've been invited to Dallas for their annual meeting, and we've been a finalist a couple times before in years past, and we're very hopeful that we'll take it all the way home this year. I have to give some additional credit to Kyle Bernice, who you met earlier, who hopefully is still behind me. He's our district manager for this area, and yeah, Kyle's still back there. Yeah. And Kyle is the person who spearheaded our application process this year. It takes a lot of work to put that packet together, and Kyle did a tremendous job to get us this far. So hopefully when you meet in October, we'll be able to bring our plaque and show you the gold medal award that we got. So very, very excited about that. The next thing is the High Plains Arboretum. So the leadership of your bodies approached us and asked us to work with the city of Cheyenne to talk about assuming responsibility for a portion of the High Plains Arboretum, which is located outside of Cheyenne, a little bit to the northwest. Thank you. Yeah. A little bit to the northwest of town along the military base. It is in a site that was created in the 1920s, 1928, I think it was founded. And it was part of the Cheyenne Horticultural Field Station from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Speaker Summers told me that he doesn't think there's a ranch in all of Wyoming that didn't benefit from that facility at some point during its almost 50-year run. It was critical to the development and research of plant life around the state. The city of Cheyenne is taking care of it now. It's in need of some help. And so they approached us and said that they thought we would be good partners to take a look at the site. So we've started our site criteria process, same process we went through last year when we did the Sutton site. And we're early on that process. The folks have asked us to do an expedited version of our site criteria process. So we will be finished with it this summer, which it's a little faster than normal, but not crazy. We're having meetings with all the partners concerned, working closely with the city of Cheyenne, the Botanic Gardens, the USDA, State Office of Forestry, and others. All the legislators in the Cheyenne area have been contacted via email and will eventually be interviewed, hopefully, if they're interested, by our team to find out what their thoughts are on the project. It's a really critical piece of Wyoming history that needs to be preserved, and so we're taking a look at that through that lens. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that particular one. I'm sure that's a big new one.
Any questions, committee? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some of the rationale behind going through an expedited process. Because I usually advise my clients, I'm like, smooth is slow, or, but that slow is fast sometimes. So I'm just a little nervous and I want to know why.
Oh, Madam
Mr.
Chairwoman, Senator Ellis, Speaker Summers and Chairman Nicholas asked us to expedite the process.
Okay. Any more on that or?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Just a couple other small things. Oh, not small things, but next is the 250th anniversary of the semi-quincentennial for the United States. I've talked about this before, I think in front of this committee, maybe when we did interim topics. The bicentennial in 1976, which was a a huge event in the United States. It was a huge event in Wyoming. There were more than 1,200 events that took place statewide here. In 1976 alone, to celebrate the bicentennial, almost 350 of which were sponsored in some way by the Bicentennial Committee. Some of those projects affected state parks directly. The keystone project for the entire effort was the creation of Independence Rock as a state historic site, obviously successful. They paid off the mortgage that was owed on Trail End State Historic Site, which enabled it to then become Trail End State Historic Site. And the last of the property that became South Pass State Historic Site was purchased with funding from that bicentennial effort. So had a huge impact on us. And you know, where I grew up in Wisconsin, many similar things happened. Parks were created, trails were made, historic sites were saved. It had a huge influence on my life. It was, you know, I was 10 or 11 years old back then. And it really kind of directed the path I took with my career, got me excited about history, got me excited about parks. And I think that we have an opportunity to do something similar now with the semi-quincentennial, to get some events going and really make a difference. I know that there are a lot of partners who are eager to get going on this, not just in our agency, but other agencies outside that we've spoken to are really excited about this. I believe the governor was to sign an executive order last week, and it fell through, creating a task force. And hopefully that'll happen sometime soon. They'll get it back on the schedule, and we'll move forward with that.
Any comments? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Co-Chairman. Just kind of highlight that. Co-Chairman and myself and our good governor and his liaison have started some comments and some discussion from our area. We kind of had that on our list of topics, and it was kind of pushed down a bit, even though we know that it's not really, you know, pushed down in our area. I mean, it's something that we want to definitely highlight, but we're in the beginning process. And so I was excited when the governor was going to go ahead and get that started, but I know it fell through. And so we'll be on top of that and help out all we can as a TRW committee, and see what we can do to help out, because I think we can make it an amazing celebration for Wyoming. I've started doing a little research myself to see what other states are doing. And, you know, we're not behind the 8 ball, but we need to get going on it for sure. So thank you for your.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, Madam Chairman.
Any other comments? So I would just say that I love the idea of creating things that have a long-term impact, like we did in 76, and looking at those bigger projects and not just of fireworks or something. I mean, just to say, how do we expand in our state the importance of historic sites?
Madam Chairwoman, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to work across the divisions in our agency as well. We've had some meetings with state archives and the state museum who are very interested in working with this. I'm sure there are many things we could do with the Arts Council and Cultural Trust Fund as well. So I think you're going to see an agency-wide approach. I don't want to speak for the director, but I'm sure you'll see an agency-wide approach from us as we move forward.
Well, I want to thank you for keeping this at the forefront of what we need to do to start planning. As I understand it, other states have started years ago in their planning.
Madam Chairwoman, we are a little bit behind, but we're going to catch up quickly. A lot of enthusiasm behind the effort. So I have just one more thing, if I may. I wanted to talk briefly about a couple of the grants that we've received and a little bit about our interpretive program here in state parks. A couple of years ago, we received, and I think we've already reported on this in the past, 2 grants from the Helmsley Charitable Trust, one for $600,000 to create an interpretive center at Medicine Lodge State Park. That interpretive center is slated to open this fall, and we'll make sure that y'all get invited to that so you can come check it out. It's a very exciting project. Gives a chance to tell that story even better than we already do. And then there was a $1.1 million grant to do the same thing at Fort Phil Kearny. And that project's a little bit behind schedule. Construction costs and a couple other things have delayed it, but I think we're still hopeful we can open that sometime in 2024. So some sizable grants. Director Glenn was integral in getting those grants when he was in his previous role, and we're hoping to keep a good relationship with that group so we can maybe apply for some other funding in the future. Another grant that's very exciting is we received a grant from the steel, the equipment folks, chainsaws, et cetera. They gave out 5 grants, 5 $20,000 grants through the National Association of State Park Directors. And we were chosen among many applicants to be one of the 5 grants. Angelina Stancompiano, and Kyle Bernice, the folks behind me, are the ones who came up with the grant proposal. And we've matched it with an additional $20,000 of our own funding in-house, and the project is very exciting. A lot of educational, interpretive components to it. You're going to have a chance to see that tomorrow. It's a pollinator project, a pollinator garden statewide. We have 5 of them at 5 different locations, one of which is at Bear River State Park. So when you come out to the park tomorrow, and I hope you can all make it out there tomorrow, we'll give you an opportunity to not only see that, but see the not 1 in 10 million white not bison that's out there that's getting all the press. Just a final word about our interpretive program. We've always done a great job with our interpretation at our historic sites, and not so much at our rec sites, at our parks. Until the last few years, we've really dedicated resources to making that an important part of what we do. We went from having 0 full-time interpretive personnel to having 3 now. We basically reorganize as positions become available and have created 3 full-time interpretive positions. And I think we have 3 or 4 seasonal interpretive positions this year as well statewide. So we're trying to cover the entire state with people who are getting out there and interacting with thousands and thousands of people. It's an important part of what parks are supposed to do. And it's never been a strong part of what we do. And now I think it's one of the strongest parts of what we do. And it's, in large part to the folks, due to the folks behind me who've done such a great job. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions on Mr. Nayland's report, any piece of it? Okay. Good. Back to Director Glenn, or back to Sarah, who.
Madam Chairman, I believe next on the agenda is discussing the Arts Council, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Great. Bring up Rachel,
Yeah,
and
so-
I'm going to sneak to the back.
Okay. So do we have other folks coming up?
Yes.
Great.
I need some.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair Committee. I'm Rachel Clifton. I'm the Assistant Director of the Wyoming Arts Council, and I just want to say thank you for putting some time on the agenda to talk about the Arts Council. Being mindful of our time today, and also that you have this lovely handout in front of you, hopefully. I'm just going to kind of walk through this handout so that we can kind of stay organized, but go a little deeper into some of the talking points. But I think Sarah had a few comments you wanted to make first.
Thank you. The Madam Chair and Co-Chair of this committee asked us to give kind of a high level overview of the Wyoming Arts Council, since there's so many members. And so that's kind of what Rachel and I put together to try to do for you today, is just give you a kind of a broad sweep of what the Arts Council does. And so I want to start us off really quickly by just giving you the lay of the land in the sense that the Arts Council is kind of small but mighty. They're a staff of 7. They are the entity that receives the state partnership grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. All states receive that, and per their legislation, 40% of their budget to the states goes directly to our state art agencies. Each state's required to match the federal money 1-to-1 with state legislative appropriations. So that just kind of gives you the lay of the land on how the Arts Council is funded. And so what that amounts to, our last biennial budget, the National Endowment for the Arts was $1,356,000. State money was $1,755,000. And just keep in mind that NEA dollar amount isn't under our control. It changes with the federal budget all the time. And so we are required to match 1-to-1. If we don't make our match, we don't get funding from them. So, I mean, we get our funding, but we won't get the full amount. We only get what we match. So just, that's kind of how our agency works, or our program works. And I just want to start out a little bit. The arts are an economic driver in the state of Wyoming, for both towns, cities, and rural communities all over the state. Wyoming accounts for over 11,500 jobs in the arts and the cultural sector. We always refer to the creative economy, which that includes things like art galleries, music venues, museums, film festivals, libraries, publishers, writers, artists, cultural centers, and then many others. And of course, that has tourism's a big piece of that as well. The creative economy is also an essential driver for new business and recruitment and retention in Wyoming. As the work environments shift and change, which we've seen since the coronavirus, we've seen a lot more people, being able to work remotely. And we need to be a state where people want to come and live and stay, and not just because the business is here, but because they can work remotely, and this is just where they choose to park themselves. And so creating rich cultural communities with active arts and cultural sectors will drive business recruitment and employee retention across all sectors of Wyoming's workforce. And that just is kind of my intro to what the Wyoming Arts Council is and does. And then I'm going to let Rachel walk you through, she's kind of give you an overview of all the programs that the Arts Council has. Rachel.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, we are a staff of 7. Currently, we have one position that we are in the process of interviewing for. That's our public outreach and events coordinator position. So we'll talk a bit more about some of the programs that we do, and the marketing efforts that kind of go behind everything that we do. Our other kind of administrative position is our grants and administration manager. We give out over 100 grants every year. And so this person is responsible for fielding application questions, getting applications set up, all of the contracts that go with hundreds of grants, and just keeping track of our federal requirements, federal regulations, making sure that we're compliant with all of that. In addition to myself and our executive director, we have 3 specialist positions. So these are positions that we created with a particular focus. So we have a folklorist on staff who works with Wyoming's many folk and traditional artists, from bit and spur makers to native artists. I'm blanking, but yes, so he works with all of our folk and traditional artists. In addition, we have Amara Faring, who's our community development and arts learning specialist. So this is a position that ended up being combined after we lost a position in a previous legislative session. We combined the community development side, which is working with the arts organizations, working with the nonprofits in communities to help them grow programs, and connecting that with arts education. So also working with teachers and students and running some of our education programs. And finally, a creative arts specialist, which is kind of an umbrella term, but really she works with our individual artists. So we do offer some grant programs to individuals, and then we also offer kind of ongoing professional development for individual artists. And so she's really our conduit to those folks across music, creative writing, visual arts, all of the different disciplines. We also have a 10-member advisory board. We've got a couple board members with us today, Adam Harris and Kevin Boyles. Thanks to them for being here today. Our board is really geographically diverse. We're spread throughout the state. We meet quarterly, and we also move our board meetings around the state. So you'll notice a theme here of true statewide engagement, and that's really what we view our role is, as the state arts agency, is to get into all corners of the states, whether that's physically, whether that's with programs, whether that's with grants. We really do try and touch all corners of the state. So if we keep moving, we'll talk about grants. We are historically and continue to be a large granting entity. We do 5 different grant programs, the largest of which is our community support grant. So this is a competitive grant, meaning that they are scored and judged and evaluated by a panel. And this is only available to organizations in the state. So it doesn't necessarily mean an arts organization. It can be a Boys and Girls Club. It can be an equine therapy program that also does arts programming. What we can fund are any of the arts related programs or projects that they do. So that really does kind of help open up. School districts are eligible to apply, for example. So if there is a need beyond what their general budget is or what the school district can provide, they can turn to us to help provide that arts programming. It's also, like I mentioned, our largest grant category. So this past year, organizations could apply for up to $10,000 in operating or project support and an additional up to $5,000 for arts learning. So that's targeted arts learning activities, whether that's meeting a K through 12 fine and performing arts standard, or whether they come in as an organization and say, we want to teach our community members bluegrass music and the differences in banjo and mandolin. It has to be a targeted arts learning objective. As I mentioned, we do offer grants to individual artists, and the biggest one that we do is the Professional Development and Career Advancement Grant. So the goal for this grant is to provide a funding mechanism for artists. They don't have to be full-time professional artists, but what we want them to think about is, where do I want to go with my career? How do I want to grow my profession as an artist? And what's going to help me get from point A to point B? So this can help fund, they need a new camera, or they need a new kiln for their studio, or it can be sending them to a national conference. If they have an exhibition coming up and need to frame their artwork, they can apply to us to help offset some of those costs. Because many of these artists are out costs up front and then rely on the subsequent exhibition or performance to recoup some of those costs. We have an Arts Access Project Grant, which is a smaller project grant. It's non-competitive. So the Professional Development Grant and the Arts Access Project Grant are reviewed in-house by staff, which is really nice because oftentimes these organizations that come in for these smaller grants, they're not full-time grant writers, or they've never written a grant before. And so by being staff reviewed, our staff can kick those grants back to them if they need to clarify something, if they need to fine tune a detail, or they're having questions about their budget. Our staff can really work with them on their grant writing itself, which is just another great learning opportunity. So the Arts Access Project Grant is organizations can get 2 of them in the course of a year. So if they're doing 2 separate projects, they can apply to us twice for that. We also have our Folk and Traditional Arts Mentoring Project Grants, and this really taps into the idea that traditional arts are best learned from that passed down hands-on learning tradition. So we don't pair, the artists themselves pair a mentor artist with a mentee, an apprentice, and they work throughout the course of a year to share that knowledge with their apprentice so that those traditional art forms can continue in the state. Our 5th grant program is our partnership grants. So these are organizations that we reach out to, that we recognize you're doing work that we would like to do in the state, but we just don't have the capacity to do. And your work aligns with what the mission and vision of the Arts Council is. So we partner with, there's 5 professional teacher arts organizations in the state. So performing arts, visual arts, each have a teacher association that provides professional development for those K-12 teachers. We partner with them to provide funds to allow them to bring speakers into their conferences, to attend their conferences, and alleviate costs that way. We also have a standing partnership with the American Studies program at the University of Wyoming. They have a full-time folklorist on staff. And then also this helps funnel archival material into the American Heritage Center there at the university. And our other partnership is with the Wyoming Arts Alliance. I think some of you have met Andrew Schneider, who's here with us today. So helping that organization with their operational support. Did you wanna? Okay. No. Okay, yeah. So if you'll notice, we're definitely not going to talk about all this grant data. Excel spreadsheet, page by page, we'll skip that. But I do just want to point out, you'll notice a kind of an uptick in the past few years in the number of grant applications we're receiving and the grant dollars being requested to us. We do not fully fund most grants in that competitive community support grant simply because we don't have the funds. So we do a formula funding to get dollars out into those organizations, but you'll notice the demand is increasing and we're trying to keep up with also increasing our ability to fund as many projects as we can. So those are the next, couple of pages on here. I do want to point out, we track our data. Our grant system allows us to track who we're serving, where our gaps might be, and included in that is grants by county. So just to point those out, recognizing Converse, Niobrara, and Weston County are the only three that we haven't had grant dollars go to in the last 3 years. I will say we are small but mighty, and our staff is able to pivot really quickly and get out and do outreach in these communities. And so we know moving forward, we're going to be making some phone calls and sending some staff to these counties. And an ability to do that has been really huge for us in the past. The next few pages are just some grantee highlights that really showcase kind of the breadth of what we do and the range of organizations and programs that we support. It really does range across all disciplines: theater, music, visual arts, operating support. We also often have organizations come to us and say, we have a new board structure. We need some help getting our board members all on the same page, and being able to provide grant dollars and just that professional assistance to those organizations to kind of mentor them forward is really important to us. Again, demonstrating just a full statewide reach to those different organizations. The other thing, as we kind of move towards the programs section, we are largely a granting organization, but we do some additional programming, which is the fun part of the job. We offer fellowships, and so we run them as grants. They are awards that recognize excellence in individual artists' field. So these are judged by jurors from outside the state who review an artist's portfolio, and they are given award dollars, but also the opportunity to publicly present their work somewhere in the state. So just on Saturday, we were up in Jackson and did a performing arts showcase at the Grand Teton Music Festival. We partnered with them to use their space and their tech and their sound and lighting crew, and it was amazing. We had 3 musicians and 2 dancers, just able to create new work as a result of receiving their fellowships and really explore and stretch their career with those funds, and then showcase their work to their community. And that's going back to what we do. Is we often think of artists as working in their studio, very insular, and that's not the case. And that's not, we like to see them engaging with their community. We like to encourage that community engagement across the board. Again, just kind of skimming, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but skimming through.
So time wise,
Yes.
I think you're in pretty good shape. So don't skip things that you deem important.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to highlight, I mentioned our community development and arts learning specialist. As part of the funding that we get, the federal funding that we get from the NEA, we also get a pool of money from them and the Poetry Foundation for a program called Poetry Out Loud. And this is a nationwide program for high school students. We get a lot of homeschool students participate in this program. So it's a poetry memorization and recitation contest. They compete locally, and we've been working with county libraries to help put on some of those local events as well. And then they come to Cheyenne and compete in Cheyenne. And then the state champion goes on to Washington, DC and competes against all of the other statewide champions. And so the picture in here is Alora Umbach. She's a homeschool student from Natrona County who was our state champion this year, went to Washington, DC. It was her first time out of state. It was her first time on a plane, and it was her first time in a big city, and she loved every second of it. So creating those opportunities for Wyoming students is so important to us. At the bottom of this page is the Art and Public Buildings program. This is one of the programs that we run that is established in statute. So this sets aside 1% of general funds from new construction, capped at $100,000 on any new building program. So this program is at Central Wyoming College currently. It's been at, I think, all of the community colleges at this point. Just a range of different buildings. The medium security facility in Torrington has a piece of public art. The goal is to help beautify these facilities and put public art in those public spheres where you wouldn't necessarily otherwise have it. So it creates these little pockets of encounters with artwork all across the state. And then those pieces do become part of the State Museum collection. So they become Kevin's purview once the projects are completed. So looking ahead at some of the projects and initiatives that the Arts Council is undertaking, we've highlighted a few here. One of them is the Wyoming Independent Music Initiative, which was started 2017. This was in direct response to there not being a whole lot of opportunities for Wyoming's independent musicians to tour, to get their name out there, to get in front of audiences, signing record deals. And so looking at that kind of subsector of who we serve and finding creative ways that we can help address those issues. So a couple of things that have since come from that. The past 4 years, we've sent musicians to Tree Fort Music Festival in Boise. We did a bunch of research on regional music festivals, and Boise is close enough to Wyoming to draw an audience from outside the state. It's massive, just absolutely the number of industry professionals that attend, that of just general public. They have 200 some musicians playing on stages all across the city. So getting Wyoming artists out of state in front of those new audiences, while also giving them the opportunity to book other gigs as they traveled to Tree Fort, has been really fruitful and really beneficial for those musicians. The other thing that just launched a few weeks ago is something we call the Road Trip Playlist. So you can find us on Spotify. It's 23 different Wyoming musicians right now. It's a curated playlist, and it's all Wyoming musicians ranging from bluegrass. There's a heavy metal group on there this year, singer-songwriters, you name it. And they are also geographically dispersed, and we're advertising at all of the visitor centers, the state parks, so people can kind of listen to Wyoming musicians as they travel the state this summer. Creative aging is another big one. We had done some research into health and wellness and how the arts can help health and wellness initiatives. And we honestly had looked at, working with veteran populations, and what we determined was, and what we heard was, Wyoming's aging population, we have one of the highest percentages of aging adults 55 and older in the country. And there was really a need to build programming around that. And so the creative aging program does a couple of things. It helps with some of the memory loss, the loneliness that some of our aging populations face. and teaches them sequential learning. So it's from one week to the next, they're doing creative writing, they're learning how to write a memoir, they're taking ceramics classes, they're painting. So they're learning new skills also while they're building community. So it's a very unique community of people who are like-minded, have similar backgrounds, similar experiences, and they develop a comfort level of working together to learn a new skill and try something new. And that's been really well received. It's a program we're continuing to grow and find grant funding to support. The last few pages, well, there's a couple more, I lied. The last special programs page, I think some of you are familiar with the Governor's Arts Awards. I think some of you have attended in years past. We do this every February in Cheyenne in conjunction with our board meeting. We run the nomination process. So we reach out and select people, receive nominations from people who have had an impact in the arts from across the state. And then the governor makes his selection and they're recognized at an awards ceremony and banquet dinner in Cheyenne. So if you haven't been before, I would definitely invite you all to attend. It's generally over session. So if you're sticking around that Friday night, February 23rd, this coming year. In addition to that, we have partnered, I just want to highlight the Arts in the Parks program because Nick Nalen, who you just heard from, has been instrumental in helping us build this partnership with parks. Yes.
Thank you,
Mind if we interrupt?
Madam Chair, before we leave that
Senator-
topic, when are deadlines for nominations for the Governor's Arts Awards due?
Yes.
Rachel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Ellis. We will open the nominations after our August board meeting, so likely in September, and close them probably in early October has been our target deadline. Yes. Yeah, so if there's, oh,
Sorry, go ahead and continue, Rachel.
thank you. I was just going to say, if there's anyone in your communities that you know of who have championed the arts or who are artists who are doing great work across the state, absolutely please nominate them. Yes, I wanted to highlight Arts in the Parks. We have, I think this is our 6th year going into this, that we have been partnering with state parks on a plein air in the parks event. So this year we'll be at Kurt Gowdy in September, and this is artists from the Front Range and from all across the state come in and spend 3 or 4 days in a state park, painting and drawing. And we had a fiber artist last year, which was really fun to see. So they work in the park for those days and have to complete work. And then at the end of that, we do a sale and reception and they can sell their work. And we do awards for that. And it's just been a great partnership with parks and all the different district managers. We try to move it around the state and really highlight what each different state park has to offer. So like I said, we're in Kurt Gowdy this year and then to be determined for next year. So that's the quick overview of the Arts Council. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? I had a question as Senator Ellis asked about the deadline for to nominate people. Do you have a list somewhere of people that have won the award so that we can not renominate someone?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a list on our website and I'd be happy to send that out to the committee as well.
Co-Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question, actually not a question. I was trying to figure out how to frame this in a question. I'm just going to make a comment, leave it at that. But if you're ever in Evanston in March, we have a huge Celtic festival here and which has been helped tremendously by these programs. And it's awesome. We have performers from all over the world, Ireland, Scotland, besides locals and folks from the United States. And so that's just one example of what this program has done just in our community and our young musicians. That's just grown exponentially every year. So thank you for what you guys do. And I can't think of a way to frame it as a question. So
Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Senator Baldwin.
Just not a question, but I can make it a question, unlike the chairman. That is just a quick comment and a thank you to the Arts Council and as well as some of the people who presented this morning. Upcoming here in a couple of weeks up at my neck of the woods in Kemmer, we have the Sheep and Wool Festival, the first annual, which is going to be a huge event. We talked about herding cows this morning, where they're going to go out and herd some sheep. And they're going to shear some sheep and they're going to eat some sheep. And then they're going to dance. I don't know how those are all related. But I think I think it's going to become a big deal every year. As well as next month, we have the Oyster Ridge Music Festival, which has turned into a giant thing. If you've never been, it's certainly worth going to. But I would offer my thanks and would say if anybody that's gone, don't you think that's a great event? Everybody shook their head. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Sarah.
I just want to say, well, one, I am a huge, I was really, that came as a cultural trust fund grant as well, the Wool and Sheep Festival. And I'm super excited about it as a knitter. That's really exciting stuff. And then Deputy Director Nayland just reminded me that the person who won the plein air event last year is going to be on their annual day use pass. So if you see that, that's going to be, their artwork's going to be featured on there, which is pretty cool.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This doesn't fit in any of the agenda items that we have, so I'm just going to throw it out there right now. Years ago, when we were commemorating suffrage, one of the things we passed was a resolution and we asked for the National Women's History Hall of Fame, I can't remember the exact name, to induct Esther Hobart Morris. And so we passed that resolution. I think it was forwarded to them and then they didn't do anything with it. So a few years ago, I called and I visited with a woman out there and I said, you know, I'm from Wyoming. I love Esther Hobart Morris. She knew who she was. She gave me some guidance on submitting some applications. So I had a whole bunch of people working on, I submitted one. I had two historians, one lady who wrote a book about Esther and then another gal who speaks about Esther. She's a historian. I think the Secretary of State's office submitted a letter of support and maybe even someone from the governor's office. And so I thought we were doing pretty good and then nothing. My goal was to hopefully get her inducted at the same time that we had her statue fixed. And so her statue's fixed. I don't know if that fits in any of the work you do, but I don't know how to get a louder megaphone. It to me is just makes me angry. Esther's awesome. She's somebody I'm proud of. I don't want to get in the statue fight of where the statue should be located. I just think she should be inducted in the Hall of Fame. So I'm kind of my call and my plea out there to the universe is if anyone wants to help me carry this torch, we have got to figure this out as a state. It's long overdue.
Sarah.
Madam Chair, couldn't agree more. And Senator Ellis, if there's any way we can help, you and I could chat about that. And who knows, maybe we'll come up with some bright idea and get it to happen. But yeah, that would have been fun to bring Esther in with a ceremony.
Any other comments from the committee or questions? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just like to say I appreciate all the work that the Arts Council does and state parks as a whole agency. Wyoming is a state of rich cultural heritage, and it's a lot of people like to say, well, that doesn't belong here, but it is who we are. And I mean, I come from Rock Springs, where we're the home of 56 nationalities, and it's important to recognize that and support it. And I appreciate all the work you do.
Sarah.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I just want to say that it's always interesting whenever I go to national arts conferences. They have programs specifically for rural parts of states. Wyoming is a rural state, all of it. And so, you know, I think all programs that the Arts Council do are important. And I think there's a lot of them that particularly hit home in the state, like the folk and traditional arts program, where traditional, you know, we have some of those people still left that are willing to train youth or anyone who wants to come in and work with them and learn one of those skills that are disappearing. And it's really important particularly in a state like this. So thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I think if you're completed, that's great. Then we would take public comment on any of the state parks and cultural resources information that we've been given. Welcome, Sean. So if you would
Madam
please
Chairman.
once again state your name and affiliation.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Sean Reese. I am the Director of Wyoming Humanities. And I would like to explain how Wyoming Humanities fits into this cultural network that you've been talking about today, how we serve the state give you an example of some of the things that we're thinking about as we prepare to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So I would characterize Wyoming Humanities Council as being a cousin of the Wyoming Arts Council. We were created out of the same federal legislation, the Federal Arts and Humanities Act of 1965, which created the two endowments, National Endowment for the Arts and Endowment for the Humanities. They then took different paths as they made their way into the states. The arts councils became creatures of state government. Humanities councils became independent nonprofit organizations with a strong tie to the state. We are required by the federal government to have a certain percentage of our board members appointed by the governor. Our goals are to serve the state. And so, and like the Arts Council, we match our federal funding dollar for dollar. So many of you know, some of you may not know, the Wyoming Humanities Council receives through a budget footnote to the State Parks and Cultural Resources budget about $300,000 per biennium, so $150,000. And we grant that funding out to museums, libraries, historical societies with a match requirement at the local level. And with the state dollars that come to us, and then the local dollars that are generated when we grant those dollars back out, we meet a substantial amount of our federal match requirement. So the state funding is incredibly important. We use it for organizations to explore Wyoming's identity, Wyoming's community, Wyoming's connection to the land, Wyoming's ability to manage change and persistence through public programs and preservation projects, digital media projects such as documentaries. For the sheep and wool fair, we've provided grant funding for oral histories of longtime ranching families. We're just recently provided grant funds to an Eastern Shoshone cultural organization to develop an app for their language preservation efforts. So the state funding is incredibly important to us. And like Sarah mentioned earlier, we're very complementary to the Arts Council and to the Cultural Trust Fund. Unlike the Arts Council, we cannot pay for any art. We cannot pay for the performance of art or the creation of art. I think of things in terms of the Arts Council being about expression and Humanities Council being about developing understanding. So what are the humanities? I think the best example of the humanities coming together is the Declaration of Independence. If you think about the Declaration of Independence, having been drafted considering philosophy and religion and history and democracy and rhetoric and language and just the civil ability to come together and with a group draft a document, finding compromises along the way. I think it's a beautiful example of humanities in action. All of those fields, history, philosophy, law, religion, literature, those are all the humanities. As we start thinking about how we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, we think about what the document did. It looked at the conditions of the day. It channeled the philosophies and histories of the past, in particular the Greeks, and then it looked to the future to chart a new course. So one of the things that we've been working on with a number of other organizations is looking at Wyoming's historical record. And what is the future of Wyoming's history? There is a lot of excitement in Wyoming's history right now. If you have the chance, I hope you can take a look at a new revamped online encyclopedia for Wyoming called wyohistory.org. This new website is incredible with components geared for travelers, different tours, oral histories, The content is incredible, teaching guides. The Wyoming Historical Society right now is planning next weekend tour of Star Valley. The Alliance for Historic Wyoming, which is a historic preservation organization, has been doing some incredible tours of places that traditionally have been off limits. Last year, I went on a tour of the Arapahoe Ranch in Hot Springs County, which was incredible. When we look at these organizations, though, over time, the tendency is to become siloed. And as funding has gotten tighter, resources are more challenging to come by. We realize that there's a need for all of these different history-minded organizations to work better together, to collaborate, to advocate for one another. And so we've pulled together organizations such as the State Museum and State Archives under Sarah's purview, the American Heritage Center, the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, the Alliance for Historic Wyoming, the Historical Society, wyohistory.org, and other organizations to come up with our own plan for how we can do a better job coordinating efforts, sharing information, sharing resources, advocating for one another. We think that's a very fitting way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in thinking about how we can do history better. Like the state, a lot of these history organizations have aging leadership that will eventually retire. And so we're kind of trying to come up with a succession plan. Who's going to take over Wyoming's historical record? And I'll say there's a lot of incredible young historians out there. And so this is a very exciting time. Besides looking at how we can better organize ourselves and collaborate, we also are looking to see what are the ways in which we can provide you as policymakers with data that shows what the economic impact of this cultural sector is. You heard from the previous presentation the number of jobs and the tie to the creative economy and innovation. We'd like to be able to take that a step further and understand what is the local benefit of having museums and cultural organizations extend a visitor stay by a night. What are the ways in which we can put together a cohesive cultural heritage plan that complements the great work that this committee and State Parks and Cultural Resources is doing with outdoor recreation, great work that travel and tourism is doing. How do we do a better job of coming up with a consistent and cohesive and local heritage tourism plan that complements these other components? So we're looking at what other states have done, primarily Utah and New Mexico are two of the standout states that have done not only comprehensive economic impact studies, but also comprehensive heritage tourism planning that helps at the local museum level, as well as helping at the state level, those agencies coordinate their efforts. So we're very excited about where this will go. We're also thinking about the teaching of Wyoming history and what can we do to help teachers. We know that the nature of teaching history is changing. It's not all textbooks anymore, and there's more video content and more online curriculum. So we're trying to figure out what are the best ways in which we can help Wyoming educators teach Wyoming history. We have some great experience with the Indian Education for All Act, in which we have helped develop a lot of curriculum and learning modules and online content. We increasingly want to do that for Wyoming's history. So it's just a brief update, and I hope we will be able to keep you updated as this moves forward. It's a very exciting time in Wyoming's historical record. And I think pulling all of these pieces together is a fitting tribute to the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Thank you. Any questions about the Humanities Council? No, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Other public comment about the state parks agency update and the Arts Council. You just need to,
Oh,
there you go.
it's my first day. Thank you so much for your time and opportunity for us to come and share our testimony with you guys today.
So if you
The
would,
arts-
state your name
Oh.
and who you're with. Thank
Yes,
you.
my name is Jennifer Wilkins. I'm coming as the Assistant Executive Director for the Star Valley Arts Council. I am a champion for the arts with WIA, and that's who I'm representing today. First of all, I just wanted to mention how important it is for our small community of Star Valley to have things such as the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, as well as the Wyoming Arts Council. The involvement that they have in our community is outstanding. I've been a resident in Star Valley for about 3 years now. I am a performing artist. My specialty is circus arts. So I've brought some circus arts programs and classes to the residents in Star Valley, which has been very well received. We don't have very many things like that there. The Arts Council has been very helpful for me in introducing me to people such as Andrew here, and others in the valley that I can speak with when I need assistance. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
I can, but I was wondering what circus arts are.
Oh, yes, I would love to talk about circus arts. That's something I'm really good at talking about. So I'm actually a professional aerialist, so I like to climb on things, do tricks in the air. If you've ever seen The Greatest Showman, that's kind of probably the best thing I could describe as what I do. I'm a contortionist and I perform with fire as well. So if you've never seen anything like that live, we will be performing in Casper for the Nicolason Art Museum's Nick Fest. So that's another huge opportunity that has been given to me as a circus artist here in Wyoming. I do want to express also how proud I am of the Arts Council, the Star Valley Arts Council. They've come a very long way in the last few years since I have come on board. We have developed certain programs such as the Youth Chorus, a youth theater program. We bring in Montana Shakespeare in the parks every year, so we can have a little diversity there. As well as a plein air festival. So our plein air artists now have an outlet. We bring in a lot of tourism that way as well, which is great. So the arts are thriving in Star Valley, and we have a lot of economic development that's happening because of that. Other organizations such as the Salt River Art Society has assisted in revamping the Ford Theater, which is one of our historical theaters there. The Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund helped them revamp their lighting. So we have brand new lighting in there now. We would like to build a bigger stage and renew the face of the theater to the Ray Theater, which was the theater in 1935. So we would like to kind of bring that back to life. Salt River Art Society also does community theater and a lot of retreats. They just did a women's retreat and are advocates for bringing in more opportunities for artists as well. We do have a program also. Horse Warriors is an organization that has been affected by the Wyoming Arts Council. They deliver different health and wellness programs through the arts and through equestrian education. Even their last program they brought in was for cancer patients, so they could come in and experience something within the arts and equestrian industries. Sorry, let me look at my notes here for a second. I really do believe that if we put forth more opportunities for our arts educators, that's going to build more within our community. We kind of lack a performing arts space or a building that is dedicated for the arts. We do have to share the high school space, which the high school is very busy. They have a lot of things going on. Syncopation is one of our pride and joys in Star Valley. It's a group of singers, our student-based singers, and they bring out hundreds of community members. They're fantastic. If you've ever seen them, I see you shaking your head. I'm sure you've seen them before. They're fantastic. On top of that, we have Broadway standard productions that are put on through our high school. Our theater teacher is incredible. But because of that, we have a lot of things going on the stage, one of which is prop building for our musicals. We did have a funding that came in through the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund for a Broadway show, The World of Musicals. And it was a little difficult for us because we had the middle of the prop making for the musical for the high school, while our production of World of Musicals came in and performed. So it is a little tricky for us to kind of navigate the stage and making sure that our community programs have a space, as well as our world-class programs we try to bring in for experiences. So that is something that we are in need of, but I feel in general, the arts are growing so beautifully in Star Valley, and we have so much support from the Arts Council and everyone involved. So I really appreciate everything that's been given to us thus far and really hope for progression in that.
Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer? No? Okay. Andrew, you're up? Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Andrew Schneider again, Director of Operations with the Wyoming Arts Alliance. I really just want to thank you all first and foremost for taking the time to look at the Arts Council. I think it was really valuable to look at the Cultural Trust last year in a special presentation, and with so many new members, it's really great to introduce what we do in the arts and culture sector. Just a quick couple sentences of background about myself. Was born in Wyoming, child of artists. I always joke the ag generation gave birth to the engineers, and the engineers gave birth to the artists, and the artists gave birth to the arts advocates. So that's how you wind up with me here. Just by way of biography, my dad was a spotlight operator when they built the event center in Casper. When the best Rocky movie came to shoot in Wyoming, they picked him up. They got him to join the union. They took him out to California, and he had a 25-year career in films there. So that's another kind of way of how I got into this creative industries development. And for me, I connected my passion and the chance to grow up outside on Casper Mountain with a bunch of artists in that community into trying to help others and foster that creative growth. So when I was lucky to move back to the state a few years ago and find this creative zeitgeist happening, this job opened up and I moved into it, and I'm just have been happier than a pig in. Never mind. I just have 3 pages of information to go over, and mostly I'm going to let you review it on your own time, but I'll just point out some highlights. The Arts Alliance celebrated 40 years last year. We thank the Humanities Council and the National Humanities for helping us with some funding to do our 5-year plan. Obviously, 501c3s are limited in how much advocacy they can do. But on the first page, we did want to highlight the advocacy, and you'll notice that it's Art Advocacy, ART, Act, Report, Train. Part of the training that we do is a Cultural Champions program, and this is one of our cultural champions. The program is designed to have representation from each tribe on the Wind River in every county. And it's really fantastic to see these leaders develop and come along with us. You also, I hope, are familiar with our cultural recognition luncheon, which is another great time when we get to report and share what's going on in the community. There's a little piece of advocacy. But primarily what we're doing is in the cultural development side. So the 2 programs that I want to highlight, the first being Champions, the other being the More Arts program. And that's really one of the biggest facets of our partnership with the Arts Council. We, by application, work with about 3 or 4 counties each year to do a 2-day workshop, bringing together about 12 of the top arts and culture leaders, municipal leadership together to basically create what I call a little mini cultural plan for the community. And then we get those groups meeting on a monthly basis. You'll see in your inbox, there was additional testimony from some of our MAP program folks up in Sheridan. You've got some letters from WYA members. You have input from some of our other champions as well. So just a quick background on what we do, and I'm always happy to answer questions anytime throughout the year. The other handout that I gave you was really, and Sarah did a great job of kind of previewing what is the creative economies, but I thought it might be helpful for you to have a reference. So I'm starting on the page that says nationally and in Wyoming. So the way that we measure creative industries is using what's called the Arts and Culture Production Satellite Account. And every year there's a report, it's maybe 25 pages. If you ever have questions about what's happening in this segment of creative economies in my county, I can pull that information for you. So this year, the highlight nationally is that for the first time in history, the United States has surpassed the $1 trillion mark in creative economies. Here in Wyoming, that boils down to 1.2 billion in activity, 4% of all Wyoming jobs. And I want to highlight that the average compensation for the sector is $76,000 and change. So it actually is quite a bit above our state average when you think about those 11,500 jobs in our sector. The reason you might not hear about the Arts and Culture Satellite Production Account is because when you look at the Craig report or you look at the workforce reports, they're combining what's called NIACS codes, the industry codes for class 71 and 72. And I'm not going to get into the weeds with you today, but all of our data is represented in there. Sometimes it's called recreation and hospitality or leisure and hospitality. I think it's much better when we think about the growth potential for this sector and we talk about the goals we have for Wyoming, addressing mental health, addressing the resilience and growth opportunities for our economy to take this look. So that's why I put that there. Museums and artists and really the whole sector represented here lost a lot during COVID, and that includes in Wyoming. So our growth from 2020 to 2021, which is the last numbers you have here, is 11% for the sector, which sounds phenomenal, except for that growth is really recovery. So in the next couple of years data, you're going to see that slow down. But I imagine you might feel that there's a lot of creativity happening around the state, and that has not been because of entirely because of the state's contribution to the Arts Council. It's actually because on the federal level, there has been a huge influx to accommodate for the fact that philanthropy has gone down in the arts and other things. So right now, you're going to see a lot of organizations in the next couple of years, as Rachel said, coming for additional support. And we think it's really crucial that that we not just think about innovative new programs, but also address the need of the requests that are coming in already through the Arts Council. And again, I can tell you which segments of that economy won and lost over the last couple of years, if you're interested in that. Last point to highlight on this page is that, you know, we, for the less than $1 million that the state invests in the Arts Council each year, we know that returns revenue to the state, right? So we have startups and growth of the sector leading to jobs, leading to state revenue. In 2017, it was estimated that state revenue from the sector was between 17 and 23 million. That was coming from the Business Council. We have not seen a report come out of the state since that time. So two things you could think about is working as a state to report out on some of that, and then looking at adopting the NIACS codes. And that really answers the question on the second page. What does the sector need to grow? I think we need some of those data. We need some of the support. This graph here shows sort of a visual representation of what the creative industries look like. It's all centered around the creative talent at the center of the ecosystem. For us in Wyoming, that's about 3,000 individuals that make that up. So the other part of that 11,500 is what we call supporting of those artists. And then you have tertiary, which oftentimes winds up being nonprofits like myself, or even state government agencies. So what we need to grow the sector now in Wyoming is the same thing that any business needs. We need access to capital, and we need access to markets. The programs that the Arts Council provides supports us with the learning of how to do that and the networking to do that. And the other thing we need is that incubation and acceleration for the sector, and the Arts Council does that as well. Just in a few sentences, because I know I'm the last thing standing between you and the end of the day here with these guys, is some other highlights statewide that I think we're going to be talking about a lot this year. The Nelge Center at UW just hired Beth Venn. We have a director. The programs are being stood up this year. Relative to that, there was a Wyoming Innovation Project Creative Economy grant granted. We're really looking forward to seeing the workshops and the pitch challenge for creative industries, which includes film and tech and a lot of other things besides just fine arts. And these other items, you've already heard about America 250, our champions and MAP. So the last one I really want to talk about is to invite you all up to Sheridan to join us. WYO will be doing a presentation during the biannual Arts Council Arts Summit, and that will be October 27th and 28th. And our session will be on that Saturday, the 28th, at the Sage Gallery in Sheridan, and we'd love to see you all there. Of course, we hope you'll join us maybe for a reception at the Nick in August, if your schedules allow, when we have a chance to bring some more of these grants and champions for you to meet in more of a social setting. And then I look forward to seeing you all in October. It sounds like for a tour of the museum, which is one of the most special places on this planet, I think. So I'm glad you're taking the time to do that as well. And with that, I will turn it over to the pros to my right.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew? Okay. We'll go next. So please state your name and who you're with. Thank you.
Adam Harris, can you hear me? Adam Harris, Wyoming Arts Council from Jackson. And I prepared some remarks, so I'm gonna go through them. A little bit of personal history and then a little bit of Wyoming art history, and then we'll bring it back around to the present. And I promise it's brief. So I was raised in Laramie by my parents, Janice and Duncan Harris, both of whom were English professors at the University of Wyoming. Almost everywhere I go in the state, I run into someone who took a class from one of my parents, from lawyers to accountants to contractors to teachers. Most of these former students were not English majors, but they all tell me stories about how their exposure to William Shakespeare or Charles Dickens or Virginia Woolf changed their lives for the better. I followed in my parents' footsteps and decided to make a career in the arts in Wyoming. I became the curator of art at the National Museum of Wildlife Art in 2000. I'm a member of the Wyoming Arts Council, as I said, and a recipient of the Governor's Arts Award. I'm still working for the museum, creating a catalog of the paintings of legendary wildlife artist Carl Rungus. Rungus himself was drawn to Wyoming, coming to a ranch in Cora in 1895 to explore the Wind Rivers, where he could hunt elk, deer, and pronghorn and gather reference material for his amazing paintings. He came to Wyoming for a decade of summers after that. Rungus would have been a great member of the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee, where he valued, honestly, every single aspect of what you all do. Just soup to nuts. It's pretty amazing. Other artists, including Thomas Moran and Albert Bierstadt, were drawn to Wyoming for our scenic beauty and abundant wildlife. Many people don't realize how rich Wyoming's history in the arts actually is. Moran's images of our northwest corner helped convince Congress to create Yellowstone, the world's first national park. So I came down from Jackson today, not just to share some Wyoming art history, but to stress my support for continuing to build our arts economy. The arts enrich all of our lives and enhance our communities. The arts provide economic impact and increase quality of life across the state. As you know, the Wyoming Arts Council has suffered decreases in funding and staffing over the last 10 years, but we have the chance to change that trajectory and increase support for the arts, increase our standing among our neighboring states whose arts funding outpaces us in many examples. And we have the chance to increase the well-being of our amazing citizenry. Thank you for your time today and for your dedication to improving the lives of all Wyomingites by enhancing opportunities in a state that has been historically rich in the arts.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kevin Voiles. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Luthien Voiles in Thane, Wyoming. Thanks to the kindness of Governor Gordon and what I refer to as 2 Senate miracles, I just started my second term as a member of the Wyoming Arts Council. I wanted to just speak to you briefly today about three things that stand out for me from my participation in the Wyoming Arts Council, and prior to that, the Star Valley Arts Council. One of the most memorable arts evenings I've had in Wyoming was several years back, the Star Valley Arts Council, with funding from the Wyoming Arts Council, brought the Miami String Quartet from Miami, Florida to Afton, Wyoming. I think it was for probably all but a handful of people the first time they'd ever been exposed to anything like a string quartet. After the concert was over, a young lad came up to me and said, "I'd like to meet the violinist. I play the violin," and he was in junior high school. And I took him backstage, and the violinist spent about 15 minutes giving him a private lesson on his violin. And I have no idea whether this young man still plays the violin, or he's a welder or a farmer or a rancher, but I guarantee he had an evening he'll never forget. But the obverse of that was the Miami String Quartet was housed in cabins outside of Afton, Wyoming. So they were out in the middle of nowhere. We couldn't get them to leave their cabins. They loved it so much. They didn't want to leave Wyoming. They loved it so much. And their normal venue had names like Paris, Rome, London. My guess is that they brought their families back and talked to all of their peers about what a wonderful time, and you have to come to Wyoming to see Wyoming. The second thing, Rachel talked a little bit about advancing artist careers, and I think that the Wyoming Arts Council plays a major role in helping young artists get the exposure they need to further their careers. The Saturday night performance at the Walk Festival Hall was pretty exciting. There were 5 artists that did a very nice job. A young man from the Arapaho tribe performed singing. There was a fantastic duo from, well, she was the honoree, but she appeared with her husband, and they were a fantastic duo. I hope that we see them on the national stage at some point. But the fact that they were able to appear through the fellowships of the Wyoming Arts Council really brought home to them, a tremendous step forward for their art. The third thing that I would like to talk about a little bit is recognition. Our society is really good at recognizing things like sports, but arts oftentimes take the back seat. I know I got more kudos as a very mediocre ice hockey player than as a principal in the All-State Honors Orchestra. And one of the things that I have found most exciting about my participation with the Wyoming Arts Council is the fact that the Governor's Arts Awards come about annually. For the first few years of my tenure, we couldn't have the event because of COVID. So it was absolutely an incredible evening when the artists from 2 years got together. The excitement that the artists have for receiving such an award, many of them for career achievements, like my colleague here, Adam, as curator of who helped create the fantastic art museum there in Jackson. It's an incredible recognition for people that oftentimes go unrecognized. So it's been a wonderful experience for me to be a part of this organization. And I just thank you for your consideration of the Wyoming Arts Council.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Boyle?
Thank you. A
Senator
brief comment,
Jones?
Madam
Okay.
Co-Chair. I just want to thank you for making the drive to be here. I think my fellow senators and I can tell you that when we do our confirmation process, that is one of the things we want to improve on, but every year we get to it and we don't do anything different. And so then we have all these names ahead in front of us and we literally sit around and go, yeah, I know that person, they're good. Yeah, that person, they're fine. And it's not my favorite process for you to come be here. I don't know who was thoughtful in making this happen, but I think this is a really smart way for us to see who you are. So thank you for making the effort for being here. I can't tell you how much that means to me.
Other comments? Thank you all. Any other public comment on the state parks piece? And I was reached out to during our break that's maybe some folks have some comments about our previous topics or other meeting consideration. Okay. Oh, yeah, please, your name and who you're with, Michael.
Mike Kusick here representing Wyoming Pathways, and in this case, myself as well. In April, the State of Wyoming Outdoor Rec Office and the Haub School hosted the first Outdoor Recreation Forum at UW. 3-day event attended by folks from all over the state. Really fantastic event to talk about and look at under the great heading that we're all here for. It seems like every single time we meet, building it the way we want it. Managing folks who are coming to our state the right way, taking a look at where it makes sense to ask folks to come to our community, to enjoy our community. As I mentioned before, so many beautiful communities in our state that aren't getting the attention that the Jacksons are of the world, or Cheyenne is for some time, for Frontier Days and things of that nature. So next year in April, and Representative Newsom was the star of the show, frankly, the panel we had at the end inspired all of the citizens in Wyoming who were there to learn how to interact with all of you in a way that is meaningful, and gave very thoughtful instructions to a room full of people who had question after question. How do we impact this for our industry? And next April, it'll be happening again in Casper this year for 2 or 3 days. I'm on the steering committee. We would love for all of you that can be there to attend, take part in the forum, take part on a panel, host a breakout group. I think it's a tremendous and meaningful way, as all these speakers have said today and all you've informed us. This is how we move the needle, together with input. So I want to be brief and get that on your calendars, at least in your airspace right now, and we'll be getting more emails out later.
Thank you. Any questions? So I just want to make a comment that forum was remarkably well done and had remarkable amount of information and networking that I really enjoyed. And I did on the last panel, we talked about how do you engage with your legislators. And what I told them was send us emails that give your personal experience. Do not send us canned emails from some organization because we delete those all day, every day. But those emails that come from one of your constituents that say, this is how this legislation impacts my lives, those are the ones that are read and acted upon. And I think that goes for everybody on this committee, that we kind of all behave the same way when we see those really personal emails, that we really pay attention. And thank you for your work on that and your other work with Pathways.
Madam Chair and Committee, thank you.
Any other comments, questions about the day? Okay. Oh, Co-Chair Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just before, we head out and before the Madam Co-Chair shuts us down, just want to re-invite everyone. I sent out an email to the agency directors and just said, please pass the word on, but we are having a little social at the Purple Sage Golf. Very easy. You can just turn right if you want when you go out of here. I know it's early. It's only 4:30, so you've got time if you want to get to your hotel and relax too. But they'll have some food and drink ready for you whenever you get up there. So even though it says 6 o'clock, heck, you could go up and putt and chip if you want a little while. It's a beautiful course. But anyway, just would love to visit with you. I think some of our local elected officials might be there, and some of the folks I think on the tourism board might be there, and Wyoming Business Council and so on and so forth. They'd love to sit and visit with you, interact with some of the TRW committee as well as our agency people. So just wanted to do that, and I'm sure you'll talk about tomorrow. So with that, I'm done.
Great. Thank you for that. So announcements, I guess that was one of them. And then any other announcements that we have? Okay, committee directives, I guess, creating that working group to work on the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund language in that bill. And then I want to thank State Parks for their brevity and for catching us from being 2.5 hours behind to just being half an hour behind. I appreciate that, but I hope that we didn't miss something or that you shortened your presentations in such a way that we missed something. And if we did, let us know and we will circle back around to those things. Any other comments from the committee as we go forward? Okay, tomorrow, maybe Interim Director Glenn, do we have a plan for Bear River State Park tour tomorrow morning? Of course we do. Where'd Kyle go? Did we lose him? So Mr. Nayland, tell us what we're doing in the.
Madam Chairwoman, we'll just meet at the visitor center at Bear River State Park tomorrow morning at 8:30. And we're going to take you on a tour through the park, talk about what we're doing at the visitor center. We're going to take you down, show you the animals, show you some of our trails. And then we want to talk about a potential massive development project that may happen adjacent to the park that will have a great effect on the park. So we have a little thing planned for you.
So a question about attire. Is this the arduous thing? Then we should bring our hiking boots, or is this, can we dress in our legislative attire?
We'll make it easy on you. If we go anyplace, we'll drive from point to point. So there are no long walks.
Okay, and quick and easy directions.
Pardon me?
Quick and easy directions.
Quick and easy directions. It's immediately off of exit 6 off of Interstate 80. If you're coming from town, it'll be exit 6 going to the right.
Co-chairman.
That's the best I can do.
I can just, I can give you a couple different easy ways too. Depending on if you're going through town, I imagine some of you are probably on Hotel Row. So if you get on Hotel Row, you can just jump on the interstate. That's slick, and it's the last exit on your right, as Mr. Newton said. Look over to your left. If you see the pilot there, that's great. If you see the next sign is Fort Bridger, you have missed the turnoff. So you'll see it.
And Madam Chairwoman, there's a massive American flag flying outside the visitor center as well. And so you'll definitely see it.
Okay, good to know. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll see you all at the committee tomorrow at 8:30 at Bear River State Park. This is not an optional tour. It is a mandatory tour. So get yourselves up, get some breakfast and be there. Yes.